Is
Okay,
Jerry recording? There you go.
okay. I now call this meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Elections to order. Um, a quorum is present. Um, and I am looking for my copy of the agenda, but I know that um, I have an announcement to make about the agenda, which is that Diane Dillon is unable to attend today's meeting, and as a result, we are postponing the Board of Canvassers meeting and the discussion of the bylaws. Both of those will take place at our next meeting. And hang on one second while I get this in front of me. Okay, excellent. So, am I correct? I think the next thing on the agenda is board president's remarks. I just have a couple of things to remark upon. First, I want to welcome Boris back from his overseas vacation. And as I
Thank you.
said before the recording was going on, we missed you, but we didn't really because we still heard from you. And of course, you are back and ready to go, and I'm sure in fine form today. Boris and I have already spoken last night and this morning, and I believe that he got back the day before yesterday. Is that right? So I think you took a few hours before we spoke. But anyway, I appreciate your dedication, but I also appreciate that you had the opportunity to take vacation.
Thank you.
I wanted to let the board know that Ami and Daniel and I were honored to virtually meet with the board of the Montgomery County Muslim Council, and we did that on July the 15th, just to hear any concerns they might have about the elections. But it was actually our initiative mostly to encourage their greater involvement in the process and to make sure that they knew about the opportunity to serve as election judges. And then Daniel and I were honored to attend an event sponsored by the Latino Democratic Club on July the 23rd, where I was given the microphone and an opportunity to make a pitch for our need for bilingual election judges, which I'm sure you guys know is a major concern. There's a huge number of Spanish-speaking voters in Montgomery County, and we always can use more bilingual judges. So in any event, those were both excellent meetings for us. I have already announced changes to the agenda. Does anybody else have any changes to the agenda or additions? Okay, well, seeing none, we go to disclosure of campaign contributions or attendance at fundraisers. Is there anyone who has a disclosure to make? Daniel, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good to see everyone. Well, given that you've already made the announcement, so I just wanted to make sure that I don't repeat what you said, that indeed we attended.
That is not a required disclosure. It is not a Democratic Party event.
Oh, okay.
And it was not a fundraiser, and therefore it was a free event, also not required to be disclosed. I just told people because it was an outreach that we did.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. Thank you.
Okay, and then obviously we will decide when we discuss the bylaws about what the rules for that will be in the future. But under the current rules, if it were a fundraiser, we would disclose our attendance, and if it was a Democratic Party event. But I believe it does not count as either. In any event, I know it was definitely not a fundraiser.
Thank you.
Anyway, Mr. Vincent.
Oh, Mr. President, I was going to ask, tell me again, was the name of the organization the Latino Democratic Club of Rockville, you say?
No, it was Latino Democratic Club.
Okay.
I believe it might be called the Montgomery County. I can get you the exact name if you would like. It is definitely a partisan affiliated organization, but I do not believe, I would have to look into it. I do not believe that they are part of the party apparatus itself. And like I said, whether or not they were, this was not a fundraiser. This was a free event, and so it would not require to be disclosed.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Any other disclosures that people have? Okay, seeing none, it is time for public comment. I believe we have at least one public commenter. Boris, is that correct? I know that is Mr. Fletcher our public commenter for the day, or do we have any others?
That's the only one. That's Michael, only Michael.
Okay, well, please, if Jerry could please promote him so that he can join us here, that would be great. And so I can now see your name, but not you. And it looks like, oh, there you are. Okay. Hello, Mr. Fletcher. How are you doing? Welcome back.
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Doing okay. Thank you. I know that you already know the rules, so I'm just going to say for the public's benefit that, you know, we have a 3-minute limit. We will try to give Mr. Fletcher a notice at some point, and you may proceed.
All right, sir. I'll just begin. At the last Board of Elections meeting, I discussed how the trend towards diminishing local control of elections is not a benefit to election integrity. One of the strengths of our voting system is its decentralization. States run their voting systems, counties conduct elections and certify the results. This makes it very difficult for those who would manipulate elections to affect statewide or countrywide election results. I urge you, the board members and election staff, to resist further centralizing control of our election system, and even to find ways to roll back some of the actions already implemented that hinder your ability to conduct and certify the accuracy of our elections. In my discussion of centralizing factors in our elections, I mentioned the Electronic Registration Information Center, called ERIC, another nonprofit that is supposed to assist the states in improving the accuracy of their voter rolls. ERIC compiles voter information from over half of our states. Although the number of states participating in ERIC is diminishing as they discover that ERIC is not doing its job. Recently, I provided data to the election director that shows thousands of discrepancies in Montgomery County's voter rolls that should have been identified by ERIC. These discrepancies are in the exact areas, registrants who have moved or died, that the National Voter Registration Act, NVRA, requires reasonable effort be taken to remove ineligible registrants from the rolls. In May and June, I provided information to the election director that identified 27,813 Montgomery County registrants who had filed permanent change of their mailing address with a state destination that does not match the state of their residence, Maryland, in the voter registration database, and 2,626 Montgomery County registrants who filed a permanent change of their mailing address with a destination that does not match the county of their residence, Montgomery, in the voter registration database. In June and July, my team provided information containing the results of a review of registrants on the Montgomery County rolls who are 100 years old or older. The county has 1,170 of these. The purpose of the review was to identify registrants who have died and therefore should have been removed from the rolls. The conclusion of the review is that at least 55% of the centenarians on the rolls in the county are no longer living. As an aside, I found the research of centenarians to be both sobering and edifying. These people were part of the greatest generation. Many are buried in Arlington National Cemetery. There was an Italian countess with half a dozen names who married a GI and moved to the US after World War II and lived in Montgomery County. Then when investigating Rockville
15
centenary,
seconds.
pardon?
15 seconds.
Okay. I came across Mr. Roscoe Nix. This was memorable because Mr. Naaman had discussed the Roscoe Nix Award in a LinkedIn post. I was edified to learn about Mr. Nix, who passed away in 2012. That's the extent of my comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fletcher. I may have some questions, but I'm going to call on Mr. Vincent first. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, Mr. Fletcher, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your comments. So as I see it, you identified over 30,000 registrants who filed a permanent change of mailing address. Was this in 2022 or when it was, did you have a time frame on that?
It was prior to January 2023.
Okay. And
I'm not sure how far back it goes, but
prior to, okay.
Yeah.
And are you saying that these names should have been identified by Eric, but were not?
well, yes, I believe that's the case because if they were identified by Eric, there should have been the process for sending out notifications to them in accordance with your rules to identify those, verify that they had actually moved, and then take them off the rolls. But the process was not started apparently because they were still on the rolls.
May I interject here for a second? As you know, not every state is a member of ERIC. I think now it's roughly half and half. I don't remember the most recent numbers because, like you said, there have been some changes. Are all of the people whose information you submitted, are they all in ERIC states, or are they all over the country?
As far as I know, they're all over the country. The information that I presented about the 27,813 people who moved to another state, those were people who moved from Montgomery County to another state.
Right.
So as I understand it, Eric should have identified those to Montgomery County.
My understanding of ERIC, and I'll come back to you, Alex. I don't mean to cut you off. My understanding of ERIC is that it works in the receiving state, and that and I know Boris has his hand up, so perhaps he can explain it better. But my understanding is that the fact that if a Montgomery County resident moves to a non-ERIC state and registers to vote in that state may not tell us that that person has registered to vote, whereas an ERIC state should be telling us, and which will allow us to then deactivate that person's Maryland registration. So if somebody moves to a non-ERIC state, we might not have that information. That's at least my understanding. Boris, is your hand raised to provide more about that, or did you have something else you wanted to say? And I should go back to Alex first.
I can speak after Alex if that's fine.
Okay, go ahead, Alex.
So, Mr. Fletcher, is it, so I guess you must have found these names, at least some of them, through means other than Eric, at least to be able to say that they'd filed a permanent change of address with a destination state, right?
Yes. No, they just filed a permanent change of address saying that they had moved out of Montgomery County. I don't know where they went, whether it was a ERIC state or not. I personally don't think that is relevant, but.
So how did you discover that they had filed this then?
There's an organization that went through the National Change of Address database that the post office maintains. And when people file a change of address, the post office puts a code on that to identify whether they can confirm that that was a move that actually occurred. And when I went through the Montgomery County rolls and compared it to the NCOA database, I just used the codes that indicated that the post office was confident that was a permanent move. Sometimes people move and they don't file change of address forms, but in this case, I used the code that indicated that the change of address had occurred and the post office had verified it.
So based on your confidence in that, are you saying that whether these were discovered by Eric or not, they should be removed from Montgomery County's rolls?
That's my understanding. Yes, these people actually are not here anymore. So,
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Boris.
Okay, Mr. Fletcher, thank you for, I would say, frequent contacts that we have and all the data that you provided. I do apologize, as I mentioned earlier, I was out for a while, but I do have, as we plan to meet, to go over the data that you provided, so we can look exactly at the data itself and the source and what could be done about it. I just need to touch upon the numbers that you presented today in few instances that might be relevant to paint I would say better picture for all of us to understand what is going on here. Mr. Fletcher did provide the data set with over 27,000 names on it. The data itself indicates that 22,000 of those voters are already inactive on our voter roll. What that means is that we did receive an information that the voter has moved out of our county. As regulated by the federal legislation, that information triggered a confirmation notice. If confirmation notice is returned with a signature on it, that person confirming that person moved wherever, that is sufficient base to cancel the voter on the voter roll. If confirmation notice is not returned to us within 2 weeks, that person, that voter is moved into inactive status and remains inactive for 2 consecutive federal cycles in which that person does not vote. So out of 27,000, the number that you provided to us initially, over 22,000 were already inactive, meaning we got the information, we sent the confirmation notice, we did not receive anything in return, and those people are inactive. We are waiting, as regulated by the federal legislation, 2 consecutive federal cycles to cancel their voter registration. Out of remaining 5,000 plus voters that were active on your list, in the time when we received the data from you, we already inactivated another 2,470. And before our meeting, I plan to run that data one more time to see how many we inactivated ever since. So it's a dynamic process. The total number that you presented is correct in terms of people who vote or who moved, but we already know and we followed the federal legislation to the letter, meaning confirmation notice were sent out, no response was received, we changed their status, and we are sitting and waiting 2 federal consecutive cycles to remove them from inactive to cancel status.
Okay,
And
thank you.
If I just can make a comment about the last paragraph of your statement, Mr. Fletcher, I have not been, I'm not a lifelong resident of Montgomery County. I have to apologize for not knowing too much about Mr. Nix, Roscoe Nix, and his life and his work. You are correct. Mr. Nix died in 2012. He died in Georgia, sir. Georgia was not part of FERC when he passed away. So I hear you that he should not be on the voter roll, but it's not failure of FERC. I'm in no way defending Eric one way or another. I'm just saying the fact that Mr. Nix passed away 2012 in Georgia we would not be able to receive that information. Something that we will talk later on with Mr. Zelaya presents his outreach presentation is the public message that we send out all the time for everyone who receives any election materials addressed to anyone who used to live on the address, who doesn't live there anymore. We always say to everyone, please do not throw it to the garbage. Send it back to us. This is a tool for us to initiate confirmation notice and inactivation process of the voters. Whether it's a sample ballot, whether it's an application, whether it's whatever kind of notice from the election mail, please send it back to us. If that person is for whatever reason not in your household anymore, they moved away, they passed away, they are in the state, outside of the state, doesn't matter. That's the part of the citizens assistance that we could receive to keep our rolls even more clean.
Boris, thank you. First of all, thank you for responding to my question that I was going to ask you before I asked you, which is what happened with Mr. Nix's voter registration, because I did see online today that Georgia is currently a member of ERIC, but now you've explained what happened. And I do remember that, and can certify that he did pass away in 2012. I spoke at his funeral, so I do remember that. And Mr. Fletcher, thank you for remembering Mr. Nix and for mentioning my remembering him on LinkedIn. Daniel, you had your hand up. Do you still want to say something?
Well, just wanted to make sure, Mr. Fletcher, that you're not, I mean, again, this is for the public as well. I mean, I'm mindful of this meeting is very informative for us as board members. Nevertheless, I think it's an educational material for the public as well. You're not alleging that any one of those individuals voted in Montgomery County and voted somewhere else, is that correct?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And thank you for that, Daniel. We wouldn't want to disturb Mr. Nix's memory or anyone else who is on that list. Alex, I would say, by the way, I still have questions, but I'm going to let others go first. Go ahead, Alex.
And I just wanted to be clear about, was there an allegation that Mr. Nix remained on Montgomery County's voter rolls for a certain period of time after his death? And how long was that? Do we know?
He's currently on the rolls.
Oh, he's on the roll right now.
Yes. Mhm.
Is he on the rolls as an active or an inactive voter?
I'm not sure of that.
I apologize. I had the problems to log in. I'll verify all the details about Mr. Nix registration in the system.
Okay. I mean, it could very well be, if I understand it, if he died in Georgia, and if Georgia does not tell Maryland about his dying in Georgia, we wouldn't necessarily have a precipitating event if he had already moved out. I guess at that point, Boris, would we have sent something to his last address in Montgomery County? Is that what would have happened?
So ever since he moved out of the Montgomery County, I'm pretty sure that board will recall that we do send sample ballots twice for the every election cycle, a number of replications. So it's a public message, not just for Mr. Nix's family,
right?
No,
right. His family doesn't own that house anymore, but somebody living in that house might be getting his sample ballot and is not sending it back to us.
That's correct. And that's a key message that we are trying to articulate and send it to everyone. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Mr. Fletcher, but anyone's assistance. And my understanding is that you have a lot of contacts through the counties and different organizations. This is the message that I think staff, the board, and anyone can send out. If you receive any election mail that's addressed to someone who doesn't reside in your household for whatever reason, because you bought the house, person moved away, person died, just don't throw it away. Just send it back to us, please. Just write, doesn't live here anymore, and we will take it from there. We will issue a confirmation notice. We will move people to inactive status, and we will cancel them after 2 consecutive federal elections.
And let me just say that Mr. Fletcher has started helping us with that process by appearing here today, because we are sending that message out right now.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate that. Alex, back to you.
I think that's all I had. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Fletcher, you indicated that there was an organization that went through the National Change of Address database in order to give you this information. Can you tell us what organization that is?
Yes, it was Cause of America.
Cause of America is the name of the organization?
Yes.
Okay. So, and what they did is they go through the National Change of Address database. Do they do a comparison with the voter rolls, or does someone else do a comparison with the voter rolls?
I did, my group did a comparison with the voter rolls.
Okay. And your group is called what?
Montgomery County Election Integrity Group.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
kind of a, you know, it's not really a formal.
It's not really a formal group, but
No.
you and your colleagues did some kind of a comparison of the list from Cause of America to our voter rolls.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And now let me, I did want to explain my comments about whether something is an ERIC state or not. And, you know, I have 2 adult children, both of whom registered to vote at one time, both of whom started registered to vote in Montgomery County, both of whom registered to vote in other states. One registered to vote in an ERIC state, one registered to vote in a non-ERIC state. The one who registered to vote in an ERIC state, that child's obviously not a child anymore, but but they're a child to me. That child's voter registration was inactivated. Now, I will say, we definitely did not send the, you know, any, well, actually, I should say that child's voter registration was inactivated, and so we did not get a sample ballot for that child. For the child who went and registered in a state that was a non-ERIC state, we continued to get the sample ballot and other election mail. Now, since that time, that both of those children have moved back to our house, so they are going to continue to vote in Montgomery County, and they have a, you know, a right under the law to do so. But and admittedly, I have 2 data points, and I know 2 data points are only 2 data points. But for my 2 data points, the ones that live in my house, the non-ERIC state did not contact us, and the ERIC state did. And I don't believe that my children would have gotten any different treatment by the voter registration staff than anybody else. In the case of the one that they were notified that that person had registered to vote in another state, their voter registration was immediately put on inactive status, and the other child's was not. That to me is the way the system is supposed to work. Now, I'm totally open to the idea that you're going to find other instances in which the system doesn't work. I'm just giving you my 2, you know, my two data points. And I would also just finish with a comment about my friend Roscoe Nix, who was a major supporter of democracy in every way, and who would he'd be having a good laugh about all of us talking about him today. But he would be just about the last person ever to do anything inappropriate relating to voting. He would be very focused on, you know, on voting, but you know, he'd be just about the last person to do that. And I will be sure to tell his daughters about how we spent a good portion of today talking about him, and I'm sure they'll be happy to hear that. Maybe I'll even refer them to the recording. Alex, is your hand still up? Or is
Actually, yeah,
okay.
actually, I was going to, Mr. President, ask you a question about the situation you mentioned with your children, but aren't we supposed to get a sample ballot for inactive registrants? Isn't that supposed to be sent out? Because they don't, it doesn't stop getting sent out until they're canceled, right?
My understanding, if I remember correctly, and you are right. I mean, I have a similar recollection to yours. My understanding is that the statute says that it goes to everyone, but that the practice was that it only went to active voters. But I don't know what we actually are doing. Perhaps Boris or Gilberto can tell us.
Because I thought the whole point was you mail it to the inactive voter, then if it comes back as undeliverable, then you know there's another data point under the NVRA, something like that. But the other question I was going to ask you is if they're both inactive now, but they come back and vote in the 24 election, they will become active again.
Correct.
And they may be registered in 2 states.
No, Maryland's a member of ERIC. They will inform the other states to take them off.
But isn't it the other state just becomes inactive? They don't get taken off right away. Do they?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that question. Boris, do you?
It's very hard for me to answer hypothetical questions for other states, especially with the difference of participating or not participating in ERIC. The logic says that, as David mentioned, when you move between the ERIC participating states, the data will follow you. The data follows you, so you cannot be on different voter rolls. The non-participating states are kind of by their own decision excluded from that flow of information that follows the voters as they move across the state lines.
So let's say we're talking about the child who moved to the ERIC state, and we know that actually happened, then they shouldn't become inactive in Montgomery County. They should have been canceled right away as soon as they registered in the other state, right?
Let me say, I'm not 100% certain as to what that child's status was. I know that I didn't get a sample ballot for that person.
So there are different data points that we'll receive from through ERIC. If we are talking about a comparison of voter registration rolls between the state will indicate that child or person X has moved to Virginia and registered there, or moved to DC and registered there, which is sufficient basis for us to cancel the voter registration in Montgomery County and the state of Maryland.
Immediately,
Cancel.
right?
Cancel it. That's correct.
Right.
If we receive NCOA, National Change of Others data points that Mr. Fletcher is referring to, that data just indicates that someone changed the address from one state to another. Doesn't indicate the change of voter registration status in a new home state. That data point itself is not sufficient to cancel anyone on voter roll that we maintain here. However, that data is sufficient for us to initiate NVRA confirmation mailing, meaning we send the note out. If the person returns the note and says, Boris Brajkovic, hereby I confirm this is my new address in Texas or whatever, here's my signature. Once we receive it, we cancel that voter registration. If we don't receive confirmation card that we sent out within 2 weeks, we don't have a signature from the voter to confirm that he or she moved out. Therefore, we can only move them to inactive status, which will remain and they will remain inactive for 2 consecutive federal cycles, or in case of David's case, if the person returns back to Maryland, the ones they will have to renew their voter registration or come at the polling place where they will that would trigger change of their status from inactive to active because they are back in their original home state.
But the person who comes back from the ERIC state will have to register anew.
That's correct. So
Trust me, that will happen.
But Alex, it's just.
I know you're going to make that happen.
I
Otherwise,
won't
you wouldn't be a good father to them,
I
right?
will not have to say a word. Trust me. I won't have to say a word. It will happen without any action on my part. But if it somehow gets lost, I'll never hear the end of it. So, you know, hopefully it will happen without any incident. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Fletcher, thank you once again for appearing before us. Oh, I do have one more thing to ask you. I'm sorry. You spoke with us at some length about your thoughts about the centralization or lack of centralization of election administration, for lack of a better word. And as I'm sure you know, our authority is quite limited in that area. We respond to the directives of the Maryland State Board of Elections. We do not have, under state law, the ability to declare independence from them, although the thought has occurred to me once or twice. But obviously we operate under a state system. And so I guess I'm asking whether there was something specific you were asking us to do relative to that, because the way I see it, we don't have a lot to say about it. We implement the laws of Maryland in our elections, and it's really up to the state to decide For example, the state legislature has given us a different rule for the no electioneering zone than exists in other counties. So in that sense, we have a different rule. But for the most part, we have the same system as the rest of the state, and we don't really have the ability to change it except, you know, in very minor ways. Are you asking us to do something specific relative to that?
Now, I understand what you're saying, but Montgomery County is a huge county. I'm sure your voice has a lot of weight with the State Board of Elections. I guess I'm just asking that you keep the thought in mind if they try to grab more power and centralize it at the State Board of Elections, that you try to talk them out of it, or talk to some of the politicians in Annapolis, and get the state board to you know, back off a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that happening anytime recently, and I hope that what you say about our influence is accurate. But whatever the case, I appreciate the clarification.
I understand that Albert Sensors is a volunteer system, volunteer quote unquote, but a lot of states have opted out of Albert. That might be a good place to talk up some State Board of Elections people.
All right. Well, we'll certainly take that that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate your being here. Okay. I believe the next thing on the agenda is the election director's report. So Boris, take it away.
Oh, okay. Thank you, David. Election report was shared with the board members last Thursday. It was it's on our website. I'll just go very briefly through it. It's the first notice and distribution of the materials, minutes of the June 5th swearing-in ceremony and board meeting on June 26th were distributed to the board on July 21st. The agenda was posted. The agenda for today's meeting was posted on July 24th, 7 days ahead of the meeting itself, and the director's report and all the packet with the documents was shared with the board last Thursday and put on our website. When it comes to the action items from the previous board meeting, outreach calendar was part of the packet that was shared with the board members and put on our website. Distribution of outreach events for 2020 for the per zip code as requested by the board members has been shared, as well as canvas minutes that were shared in the mid-July to all board members. Voter registration statistics monthly report as established practice is shared with the board members at the beginning of each month. The data covers all the registered voters as of last day of the previous calendar month. So for June, there were 677,752 active voters and 61,239 inactive voters for the total of 738,991 voter on our roll. When it comes to the state board, I just made a reference that state board is preparing a set of documents that will need to be completed, drafted by us, presented to the board for the board to review and approval or rejection in regards to the polling places in the early voting centers as we get closer to the 2020 election cycle. Personnel, the big part of my report focuses on personnel itself. The first position that I brought up is the finance position with the Board of Election. We re-advertised this position as reported earlier. The ad was up for 4 weeks. We are waiting to receive a list of qualified candidates from our colleagues from the Office of Human Resources at the county level. Tech 3 position interviews were completed. Position was offered. County Office of OHR at the county level is taking that process further. Tech 2 positions We conducted interviews last Thursday, Friday, and today. So process is being finalized. We'll follow the process further with the county. Election assistant 2 positions. These are temporary positions that we will need in every section in 2024 election cycle. We have prepared the ad. Ad should go up shortly. So we will start advertising, encouraging people to apply to join us as a temporary team members for the upcoming elections. And the last one is, of course, the OSC Office Service Coordinator position with the voter services that's going up. So our goal is to keep working on all the personnel issues, keep hiring, so we are in better position as we get closer to the elections. We just have a few temporary positions that are still open in the building. None of them is 40 hours. It's just a needs-based, activity-based that we are running in the course of summer. These temporary team members are helping us with of course, outreach events, and we are looking to design necessary materials for the new poll books that for the trainings that we will have to conduct for the incoming election judges. I shared also the budget document for the new for this period. New fiscal year started on July 1st. So this budget document totals at least reflect what is in the system and how the spending will progress as we go forward. When it comes to the section activities, water services, list maintenance is our daily activity. We receive data from different sources, as indicated here, whether it's from voters themselves, DHMH, jury commission, AOC, whichever data we receive, we process it. We have started reaching out to local municipalities to get the names and the contact details for all officials that we should notify 2 weeks before, 2 weeks in advance of any board meeting that the board discuss change of polling places of early voting centers. So our goal is to complete that part. In addition, we will have a section dedicated on our website where individuals or organizations would be able to sign up to receive those notifications. This effort is a part of House Bill 410 that was signed into law earlier this year. When it comes to IT section, again, we are working. IT manager is working with our colleagues in TABS on a replacement system for processing election judges and future vote applications. We are assisting a few municipalities with the upcoming municipal elections. This is in particular Rockville and Gaithersburg at this point. And also we are trying to prepare some maps, demographic maps, that will be presented to the board for the board to deliberate before deciding on early voting centers as we go forward and get the for 2024 election cycle. Operations. I think that this is ongoing story, and maybe Kevin will tell us a bit more if there is any development. But we are trying to organize our warehouse to start to be able to receive incoming material as we get for the second part of the year. This is the issue of the fact that we are unable to shred any election voted ballots from 2020, which kind of limits our storage space that we have on disposal. The operations is trying to reorganize the existing warehouse to make more space the best that we can. Recruitment and election support. We are processing applications from voters who are interested to serve as election judges. We are sending postcards with information to all of those who expressed interest at any point. For the last quarter, we sent out 823. When it comes to the upcoming events, during my leave, I received an invitation to join a panel with the EAC about voter outreach. The panelists were selected based on the clearinghouse awards that were headed over by EAC prior. In 2020, we did receive that award, and the meeting is on Wednesday. I believe that the other panelists, I'll have some colleagues from Georgia, someone from Delaware, and I apologize, I forgot the last one. When it comes to the website updates, as the board requested last time, I included in my director's report that this will become a regular feature going forward. These, you will see the updates that were introduced already and some updates that are work in process that we are preparing as we go forward. So based on the board's decision to change the stipend for the election judges, that was the priority to put up. We added descriptions, we added also canvassers and some other positions that were not necessarily properly or that were not so detailed in such a detailed manner advertised or explained prior. We provided some future vote updates, some corrections, and we are working on mail-in voting frequently asked questions. Basically, we have some questions from before. We are trying to expand based on the questions that we received for the 2022 election cycle. We might have frequently asked questions. What if? Because there's quite a few of those questions that we get, and maybe even more. So I can be very honest. We started with quite a bit of documents, so we are trying to make it leaner, so the voters would be able to much easier find the answer for the questions or situation that fits their query. That will be election director's report.
Thank you, Boris. Are there questions for Boris from board members? Go ahead, Alex.
And Mr. President, maybe because I'd like to definitely save time, you know, and I feel sometimes I may ask these questions at previous meetings and then I can't remember the answer, but I think it might be helpful if the budget document for certain line items might have a little parenthetical to explain what it's used for or what the sort of the top items are. Things like other professional services, other non-professional services, other central duplicating, outside postage, other mail, stipends. I think maybe that's for election judges. I could kind of compile a list and circulate it. It might be helpful to have like that in the left-hand column. And I think it would be helpful for our new members too, to have a better understanding of how the budget works. So I would certainly be prepared to submit something.
I think that would be very helpful, and not just for new members, but for those of us who are memory challenged like myself. So by all means, I think that would be helpful.
The only other comment I would have, and I wanted to congratulate Boris for being invited to be a panelist on there. That's very good news, and it's a credit to you, Boris, and the rest of our staff. Sometimes there are acronyms that are used in the election director reports that I think it would be better if they were spelled out or at least defined what they are. Sometimes a lot of times I think I know what they are, but not always.
Okay. Not a problem.
Is there something specific? Are you referring to EAC as an acronym, or?
Well, I think AOC is probably Administrative Office of the Courts, maybe. TEBS, I'm not sure about what that is.
Not to be confused with a congresswoman with those initials, AOC. So.
Well, that's right. I
Yeah.
that didn't first come to mind, Mr. President, but I could see that there was a potential for confusion. OSC, I'm not sure about that. Office of Human Resources, I think, is OHR, but there's a few of these that I don't recognize. So
and I'll also add to that it would be helpful for members of the public as well, because these materials are being posted for the public. So I think that would be helpful. EAC, by the way, Election Assistance Commission. Anyway, okay, Daniel.
You just took the words out of my mouth, that these board meetings, the intent, again, is not only for us as board members to get information, but for the public, more importantly. So therefore, the question for you, Boris, first of all, let me thank you so much and thank the entire staff for the work you guys have been doing. When I was a member of the public, and I'm still a member of the public, my thinking is elections don't come to mind this early. When should the public be engaged in your estimation, or how should we be able to amplify the work the staff is doing to fill in some of those critical position, but also roles that are needed. Are we behind right now, or are we just in line compared to your estimation? Well, let me speak for myself. I really rely on your expertise and the staff work to give that information not only to me as a board member, but also the public, so that we're able to, as we go around to events, we're able to amplify that message. Hey, please, we need more election workers. We need that, bilingual election workers. So let me just stop there, Boris, and see if you have some comments on that.
The answer goes at two different levels. One, when it comes to hiring permanent staff to the vacant positions that we had or that we have on the books for a while now, we are in the same position like any other agency in the county. Hiring is attracting people to apply is an effort in itself, and hiring process is the county process. So we have to follow the same process like any other agency. I briefed board last time that even on our end, when we conclude the hiring, personal circumstances might change for some of the candidates who were selected. They might get an offer from other agency or other business, and they might opt out, which forces us to re-advertise position and maybe keep open ad for a bit longer in order to attract a bigger pool. Let's put it this way. When it comes to the permanent positions, I think that we are okay time-wise of hiring and bringing everyone on board. I would just like to remind everyone that we are a small agency, and for us to bring a new person to the team, we have to make sure that a supervisor or someone who will be training incoming individual will be in the office. Onboarding a person while an immediate supervisor is finally getting their few weeks of leave, it's kind of pointless. So we aim hiring for the time when we will have a system in place to onboard that person and make them productive team members as quickly as possible. When it comes to the temporary team members, advertising too early in summer when everyone is on vacation, traveling, or enjoying a nice day out doesn't prove well. As we enter August, as we are getting closer to September, back to the new school year begins and everything, I think this is the time when ads need to be up. I would be more than happy once our colleague from Office of Human Resources put ad up for election aid 2 position, which is temporary positions that we will have. I'll be more than happy to share it with the board members, so you can make a comment, a suggestion, an advertisement through your multiple contacts that you have either with the groups, individuals, events, or anything else. But if you allow me, let us get ad first on the website so you can direct potential applicants to the website itself. So you would not need to brief them on every individual temporary positions that we will have. And as you remember, for the last board meeting, there's quite few either election judges or temporary positions for different sections that we will have going forward.
Thank you, Boris. Daniel, are you done?
Yes, Mr. President, and thank you so much, Boris, and thank you again to the staff.
Okay, Kina and then Margie.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Boris, for sharing your updates. My questions regarding the 823 postcards that were sent out. I greatly appreciate knowing that this is a process that you are all using to work on your recruitment. And I want to ask specifically about how you're using the postcards to specify or maybe even narrow your recruitment efforts. So for instance, if you were sending out a postcard to someone initial interest, maybe last week, are you sending out 2 more postcards? Are you using phone calls? Are you having different methods for engaging with those who are interested in order to keep their interest the whole way through?
Chris, I'll just let me just answer very briefly, but Chris, you can chime in if there isn't. So when someone expresses the interest to learn more about election judges, the program, the stipend, the roles, and everything, our first instinct, of course, is to reach out to these individuals, provide as many information as possible. Gilberto later on, he will talk about his presentation, how we do it. Is it the postcard? But we give them an option with the QR codes where they can just by scanning QR code, which will take them directly to the application itself. So we can bypass all the further conversations, just inciting people to just apply, and then you can scroll down, pick what interests you, and we will take it from there. Basically, but our intention, and you're right in saying that, so to cultivate that interest, to keep that interest alive. And I personally believe that the best way forward is to get an application as early as possible from anyone who express interest at any point. So we provide you with the information, but please apply as well. So once you are in the system, once you apply, and once the election worker management system is back operational, they will start receiving all the materials, all the notifications that are produced to any election judges. When to apply, which positions are available, what would be the stipend, what are the options, who is your recruiter, which number to call, how to engage, and everything, and all like that.
Okay. I also asked because in line with what Alex had shared earlier about the budget, understanding more about what goes into it. I understand from the recruitment side of things, in terms of having a paper trail, that does come with a cost when it comes down to recruitment. So considering how we may look at the recruitment process to, in my term, humanize it, so that we are able to have a follow through on their level of engagement from the very first day of interest to the point of actually putting in an application. Sometimes it may require much more paper trail type of engagement. Otherwise, as we're all trying to ensure, move into a more digital way of engaging with people. One, it's good for cost, it's good for the environment, and it's just an easier way of getting in contact with people. So I asked only because that's an interest of mine that I would like to see either innovations in, or have the public kind of understand what engagement looks like for an office that is as mighty as yours.
I think that later on today, when Dr. Zelaya does his presentation, he will touch on a number of these issues that you raised, and especially this, if I may be blunt, transition to digital engagement. But the way I see the county, the way I see our interaction is that we are not transitioning just to one new way. We are finding a way to marry something that's traditional, that's preferred by the whole subset of our voters, of our election judges, and find digital solutions that are attracting new voters, new election judges, which is new way of doing things. So for this on the staff level, the task is not to transition to new. The task is to keep transitioning while keeping the traditional way in the same place as well. Age doesn't really make a difference. We have 16-year-old and 19-year-olds who would scan a QR code as they fly by the outreach event or find it on our postcards. Yet there are people who, like me, never touched Kindle in my life. I still prefer to read book from the paper pages. There are people who like to fill out the paper application as well. So we have to find a way to accommodate both aspects. So keep moving forward, but keep the traditional angle as well, because there's a huge subset of voters who prefer it like that.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the presentation. Thank you very much, Boris.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Kina. Margie.
All right, thanks, David. I kind of want to add to, so I have a question in particular as it regards to the budget that you sent out for the budget, the July 2023 budget, and kind of adding on to what Alex mentioned about defining other services. I really thank Alex for pointing that out because that would be something that would be very helpful. The one line item that I was looking at on the budget was other communication services. I saw that there's been like a sizable dent in that budget, and while there the budget is nowhere near being over just for like a month. I was just wondering what other communication services was for.
Remember. Okay, so this particular budget line, sorry, I have to consult Lisa just to find it. We are as the staff, as the board, we are mandated to secure communication between the Board of Election staff, board members, and election judges at the polling places during early voting and election day. This budget line that you looked at covers that communication. And this expense covers something that I mentioned at the last board meeting, basically purchasing of amplifiers that would enable election judges to use their cell phones while communicating data or the problems to the board members. But I fully agree with the issues that Alex raised. We will try to put some more description on the budget lines, if that makes sense, and that would I think bring clarity to many of these numbers. But this specific line item refers to that communication. So communication between the board on one end, election judges at the polling places at early voting sites, because we need to provide that communication. It has to be ongoing for whatever reason election judges might feel need to call us, or if the board needs to call them, extended hours or any changes as that might be.
So just so I understand, you're talking about essentially equipment to boost the signal so that their phones will ring in places that does not have strong signal, or that they'll be able to call out as well.
That's correct. Out of all the polling places in the county, we have a handful of the locations, voting polling places, rooms that are either in the center of the building, therefore with the limited access, or at the certain part of the county where a certain cell phone reception is not as strong. We did our testing early this year, ahead of time. We were looking at the solutions. We went to the vendors, they provided amplifiers. We worked with MCPS to be able to install them around the elections. So whoever is election judge there, they won't need to leave the polling place to go to a parking lot to make a phone call to the board. They would be able to make the phone call from the polling place. What we are looking for.
And Boris, speaking for the board members who will also be in those polling places, we thank you. Because that's a big one. As one of the few people who are allowed to use their cell phones in polling places, because yes, that is and there are a number of schools where that's an issue for sure. Margie, did you have more? That was an excellent question. Thank you.
No, I didn't. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie.
Okay, Boris, I have a couple of questions. You mentioned that the new election judge stipend, I gather, is somewhere on our website, but I have to admit that I was having trouble finding it. So I guess my first question is, where should I be looking for it? And then my second question is, do we have to move its location if I'm having trouble finding it? I realize that might just be me, but
so, on our website, if you go to election workers, it's a position description and payments.
Okay,
it's drop down.
Okay. So in order to find it, it looks like it's the fourth item under the election workers menu at the top of the page.
That's correct.
And then that is the actual. It looks like it's very similar to, if not exactly, the document that we approved in June.
Yeah. So the document that was reviewed by the approved board. By the board, that's what we okay. Used.
I would just like to offer as a suggestion for you to discuss and figure out that you might want to have something a little more grabby on the for lack of a better word, on the front page of our website, encouraging people who are interested to find that page. Something not that different perhaps than the signs that we use at our outreach events, except updated for the current amounts of money. Because if someone wants to work for us, they're going to have to work pretty hard to find that page. And I want to make it as easy as possible. Now, I do realize that you could get them to that page by using QR codes or various other ways. But for the, I'm not sure I'd call them old-fashioned, middle-fashioned person
Okay.
who comes to the website and isn't necessarily finding the QR code, I want to make it easy for them to find. Keena brought up the use of postcards, and I agree actually with both of you. I mean, there are times when postcards are really useful. I personally prefer, if I get a postcard, if you want to get my attention, it should be some color other than white, or else it gets lost in the shuffle. But for a lot of people, they don't pay attention to their U.S. mail at all, and so I think that you correctly said we have to have different forms of communication to hit different people kind of where they are. And I guess my question for you is, were the postcard people, are they like the sum total of everybody who has applied, and then we're going to also send them emails, and then we're also going to hit them another way? Or was there something about them that made you think that postcards was the route? Or kind of how do you decide which of your many different tools you're using?
So the postcard is the first step. And then we are talking about this number of 800 people. We are talking about people who went online, completed voter registration update or registration, and checked the box that they would like to learn more about serving as election judge. So this is the first step on our end as an answer to the first step by the voters themselves.
But their
So
step that they're taking is a digital step, it sounds like. They're checking a box online, and we're responding with a hard copy postcard, which I understand sometimes that gets people's attention more, but it kind of depends on who they are. But what you're saying is that's just a first step, and that there are other steps involved.
Because our goal is our postcards have QR codes. We are talking about people who applied online. Assumption is that those people will scan those QR codes, and the QR code will take them directly to the application. Application will provide all the data that we would need to sustain our conversation with them. We are talking about name, we are talking about address, we are talking about email, we are talking about phone numbers. So all the data that we could use later on to distribute all those outreach or reminders, or have you considered, have you decided, join us, messages like that.
Okay, thank you. Keena, is your hand up on the subject of the postcards or on something else? Because I was going to go to a different subject, but I'll go to you first.
Yes, it's on the subject of postcard, Mr.
Yeah,
President.
go ahead.
I wanted to add a point of clarification. So I did understand what Boris had mentioned regarding the postcards and having different methods of communication. I fully see that happening right now with the staff, and it wasn't my misunderstanding of that, rather than really understanding, I guess, the process of which they go down the line. Is it a postcard? Is it a phone call and then an email? Is it just a postcard, something like that? As I mentioned before, my method of doing things when it comes to communication sometimes is to have that humanized part of it. But it's very hard to do if you don't have a large staff of people getting back to 800 some odd people for every postcard that you send out. So that was my point of clarification.
Well, and the postcard with the QR code is, I didn't understand that until Boris just said it, that it was not just a postcard. It was basically it was a postcard with an electronic return, which I think can be quite clever. I hope that none of those postcards come back because the voter has the wrong address, because that would be disturbing as a start to their service with us.
Right.
To say the least. Keena, did you have anything else?
No, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Okay. Boris, I had a question. You mentioned the, I guess, the updated list of outreach events by zip code, and I had a question about that. Should I be asking that question now, or should I be waiting until we have the outreach presentation?
I think that is better as a part of presentation, because we will touch upon.
Okay. Okay. I will say that I do have some questions about the list that we received, but I will save that for when we get to that presentation.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I have too many things that I'm looking at here, but I'm guessing that the next thing on the agenda is the attorney's report. Is that guess correct?
Good guess.
Okay,
So,
Kevin, go ahead.
Boris had mentioned an issue in terms of storage. The one case that we're following right now is Gibson versus the State Board of Elections, the State Prosecutor's Office, and 22 counties where plaintiffs have alleged that there was voter fraud in 2020 in connection with money that was given to a variety of states, but including Maryland, from the Center for Tech and Civic Life. That case was filed in the United States District Court for the District of Maryland before Judge Gallagher, and she dismissed it. It is now on appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. The appendix by the appellants has been recently filed, and they have requested an extension of time to file their brief. Pursuant to the local rules of the Fourth Circuit, the appellees, the state of Maryland, the state office of the prosecutor, and the 22 jurisdictions are required to file one brief with that, unless they get leave of court to file more than one brief. So there's no need to file more than one brief. The case was dismissed for lack of subject matter jurisdiction under 12B1 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. So the assistant state's attorney is taking the lead on that. I suspect briefing will be finished in the next 90 days. And Boris, you will have a decision within the next 4 months. I know that's not of much help to you. If you'd like, I can ask Dan Corbin whether, if storage is really becoming that much of an issue, whether we can ask for an expedited ruling and briefing from the Fourth Circuit.
If I just may say, knowing a time frame helps, so we can plan our end. Knowing that we would like to conclude as many things as early as possible, it's not obviously the preferred time frame, but maybe 4 months we can plan around that.
Sure.
It's a court ruling. Just knowing the time frame helps. Let us go back to the drawing board, see how we can move things around.
Well, why don't I in the interim speak to Dan about whether it's 2023 already. So I mean, this is material that should have been destroyed a long time ago. Let me see whether it has any interest in requesting on behalf of the state and the local jurisdictions that they expedite briefing and a ruling on the decision.
Thank you.
Okay, I will make sure to do that and report back to you on it. There are no other legal matters pending, Mr. President, knock on wood, that involve the Montgomery County Board of Elections.
Yes, I'm sure that there are plenty of other things on your agenda other than that. Okay, so next on the agenda is the presentation, early voting in the 2022 election cycle, by Boris and Mindy Williams, the operations manager.
Just give me a second. Okay, I'm here with Mindy. We will, as the title says of this presentation, we are just looking back. We are looking for at the last election cycle. Presentation is designed around some historical numbers, some historical data, and a reflection on 14 early voting sites that we had in the last election cycle. Just going forward, you will see that when I talk about historical data, I omitted 2020 for the obvious reasons, because it was an outlier which had 40 voting centers, didn't have polling places, data got skewed, and I don't think it's representative of any comparison going forward. So I'll try to be brief. I think that numbers are self-explanatory. I just want to point out some patterns that help staff when we do our planning, and maybe board members would like to reflect on them as we get closer to 2024. But that's a conversation that we'll have in a couple of weeks. So when it comes to the historical distribution of ballots that were cast in Montgomery County, you will see that mail-in ballot is going up at the expense of in-person voting. That's not the news. That's something that everyone who follows elections here could attest. This is just trying to put everything in the perspective. Percentage of early voting ballots cast is going down. If you compare to 2018, you will see the difference between gubernatorial cycle. 2016, early voting versus election day. These numbers do fluctuate, but what the key data point for me here is that both early voting and election day went down in 2022 general cycle at the expense of mail-in voting. So mail-in voting is literally taking voters from both of these types of voting in Montgomery County. Early voting versus mail-in voting. This is as clear presentation as it gets. We have early voting being above mail-in voting all the way to 2022, and then this huge shift happened, where the number of mail-in ballots, or percentage in this case, went up significantly, completely taking over early voting, the number of percentage of cast ballots through early voting. I try to group early voting, election day, and provisional in one group and compare it against mail-in voting, just to indicate the shift itself. And I think it's the last one, 2022, is indicator of preferences that Montgomery County voters might have as we go forward. I'll be first to admit, as I said many times, that we are not going to 2018, 2020 should not happen again. I'll be reluctant to make any final conclusion or determination of voters' preferences based on 2022 cycle alone. Numbers do change from gubernatorial to presidential cycle, from turnout or overall participation. There's different interest. We can talk about, I think we had spoken once about voters who don't necessarily participate in the primaries, voters who mainly are interested in voting for the presidents, not paying so much attention necessarily for the state races. Therefore, I believe that we have a solid base to understand future voter preferences, but we would need a presidential cycle to complete the picture, to start taking proper comparisons. This slide just indicates provisions that each board of elections had to keep in mind when designating early voting sites in 2022. Accessibility of the early voting centers to historically disenfranchised communities, proximity of the centers to the dense concentration of voters, public transport as the mode of transport for voters to get to the voting centers, equitable distribution throughout the county, and maximizing voter participation. These are criteria that were taken into consideration when board deliberated by itself and through public hearings when deciding on 2022 election cycle early voting sites. There are a few maps that I attached to the presentation that were previously shared with the board in the end of 2021, and the board was deciding on the early voting sites that indicate the population, the certain demographic data points, and the distribution of early voting sites throughout the county. If you count the sites, you will see that we are talking about 14. We are talking about alternate sites as well. This is the list that that we had, a list of early voting sites in 2022. I believe that the election law regulates number of early voting sites based on the total number of registered voters. Our number of registered voters sets up to have up to 13 early voting sites. the law provides an opportunity for the board to interact with the county governing body and introduce the 14th early voting sites, what was the case in 2022. As the rule, we prepare a number of alternate sites for the board, and board approves them just in case there's an issues with the previously assigned early voting sites. Sorry, I have to move this first. Talking about the totals of the early voting, I have to turnout was not that high for the primary. Turnout went up for the general elections. You will notice that on the vertical left side of each graph, the numbers are not the same, but they just provide a general picture that I will touch upon in more details when I reflect on each individual early voting site. We are talking especially about lower than usual turnout on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, which would be equivalent to day 3 and day 4. And that pattern was sustained through both primary and general election in 2022. When it comes to totals across the early voting sites, you can see I try to put them on a graph from lowest to highest turnout, primary and general. There's a small changes between the primary and general, but there's a certain level of pattern there as well. Yes.
I have not memorized the key, even though some of these sites have been sites for a long time, but could you at least let us know what some of those most popular sites are?
Actually, just give me a second. I'm not good in memorizing that key as well. Just give me a second. I had my paper with me. Okay, so just bear with me for a second. So when it comes to the general elections, we have top 4 performing sites is 5, 6, 8, and 10. And 5, 6, 8, and 10, we are talking about Silver Spring, Borough Park, J. Lawton and Chevy Chase, and Potomac Community Center.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for this. I just not good with remembering these codes either. So next, I try to follow a certain level of pattern for each early voting site in terms of presentation. First site for each first slide just gives you something more about the location itself. And this particular slide, it was presented to the board when the board was determining location of the early voting sites. And this is the pattern that we will continue presenting the potential locations to the board. When it comes to the Mid-County Community Recreation Center as early voting site, it follows the pattern of daily totals. You can see day 3 and day 4 being the lowest, and this is both total for early voting for the whole county and for every single early voting site that we are presenting. I tried to look at the hourly averages across 8 days of early voting. Just small reference, when you look at on the left, 7 a.m., that means from 7 to 8 a.m. And this pattern holds that lowest turnout is the first 3 hours of early voting, and that we experience certain higher level as we approach midday, or as some would say lunch break, or errand time for everyone to run. This pattern also holds across the early voting sites. I try to present to the board ballot styles that are voted in each early voting site. As you all know, we have copies of every ballot style for the whole county and each center. some ballot styles are voted more than others at particular early voting sites. I tried to group for the most of the early voting sites, any ballot style where 50 or more voters voted, and then all others to group in one number. For the EVO1, you will see that other 93 ballot styles generated around 450 ballot cast altogether. So we are talking about a big number of ballot styles that are voted by one or two individuals at this early voting center. And this number holds again across the early voting sites. So the next one is the executive office building. Again, the first slide just depicts the location itself, gives the basic description of the location, square footage, and the public transit available. That was available in 2022. Again, going forward, when we start discussing 2024, new survey will be conducted. When it comes to the daily totals, again, day 3 and day 4, Saturday, Sunday went down, day 8 being the highest. This last day of early voting being the most popular is very much in line with, if the board would remember my previous presentation on when do voters return their mail-in ballots. Montgomery County voters do tend to take their time to make their mind and return voted ballots. So this fits that pattern. Hourly averages in the executive office building are same like mid-county. So we are talking about first 3 hours that are the lowest, and then picking up around lunch break midday. Ballot styles voted. Executive office building is maybe particular. If you look at the far right, you will see that I had to group 192 ballot styles where less than 50 voters voted in this center. If I remember properly, this is the highest number of different ballot styles voted at any early voting site. The next one is Germantown. I will just go very briefly, but because the same data is presented for each early voting site, and the same pattern holds, whether we are talking about daily totals, whether we are talking about hourly averages, and the only difference is the precincts. Prisoner Community Center, again, maybe this is where day 3 and day 4 even more pronounced as a low turnout, but hourly averages do hold. Silver Spring. In Silver Spring, we had a kind of a very slow beginning, first 5 days, and then picking up towards the end. Hourly averages are also a bit more equally distributed across the working hours than in other early voting sites, but number of precincts is presented here. Borough Park, again, same pattern, day 3, day 4, Saturday, Sunday, very low. Hourly averages, therefore we invite everyone to vote early, 7, 8, and 9, between 7 and 10 a.m. and a number of ballot styles. Here's the only difference for the Borough Park due to the whole number. I had to precincts that are listed of the ballot styles where 100 or more voters voted. I couldn't create a graph that would be easily readable for the presentation itself, but you will see that other 161 ballot style, at least between 1 and 99 voters voted in those styles. But numbers are rather low because total for 161 ballot style is a bit over 1,000. So averages are very small.
Boris, can you hold on for 1 second?
Yes.
Tina, is your question something you wanted to ask right now or just when Boris is done?
Thank you, Mr. President, when he's complete.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Boris.
I apologize. I don't have that screen so I can see this. Okay, next one is Damascus. As I said, I follow the same pattern, try to present daily totals. Day 3, day 4, they hold steady across the centers. 7, 8, and 9 a.m. even more pronounced. Ballot styles as well. Maybe less ballot styles voted in Damascus than in other early voting sites, especially Silver Spring. Lawton Community Recreation Center. Pattern holds with a high number of ballot styles voted. Very area where people stop by. I actually served one elections there during early voting. People stop by on their way to work or back. These precincts that you see listed here, they include ballot styles where at least 100 or more voters voted. Other 128 ballot styles is less than 100 ballots cast. Next is Wheaton. Hourly and daily averages, daily totals and the hourly averages hold, and the ballot styles are presented here. Potomac. I know that all these graphs might look the same, but it was very relevant for us to know that we have a pattern so we can reflect on hiring needs, allocation of staff and equipment and everything. Potomac, again, if you see this over 100, that means there were more. There were 134 ballot styles that at least from 1 to 99 ballots were cast. But again, average is very low because we are talking about 1,500 ballots cast from 134 ballot styles. So we are talking on average maybe 11 per ballot style, but even less. Sandy Spring, patterns are there, and distribution of the ballot styles. And White Oak, newly added. It holds the pattern in terms of the daily totals, hourly as well, and the number of precincts that voted there present. Daisy Community Recreation Center. In Daisy, day 4, it's a bit of an outlier compared to others, but day 3 holds steady as a low turnout day for early voting. Bar Drive, all the patterns are there. Sorry if I'm rushing through, but I can go back and for the general public presentations on our website, so it's available for everyone to see. So this was the reflection on 2022. 2024, which will be subject of the board discussion within next month or two. I just wanted to list the deadlines so the general public can have an idea how at which time frame the board will move with the identification of early voting sites for the going forward. We have a couple of deadlines that need to be met. September 18, we have to wait for the state administrator to provide us with a number of early voting centers that we can have. October 16 would be deadline for the board to submit the plan for each proposed early voting site. And I just wanted to repeat one more time for the general public, the deadlines or the time frame where early voting would begin and end for both primary, it's May 2nd to May 9th, and for the general, October 24, October 31st.
Okay, before I go to Kina, Boris, could you go back to the next to last slide, the one that has the dates on it? Right before you said the end.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that at the moment, we are scheduled to meet on both September 18th and October 16th.
That's great.
And I was wondering if you could just comment for us, because I gather that if we meet on October 16th and we make a decision on October 16th, if you have a deadline to submit something, a form for each proposed early voting center on October 16th, that sounds like it'd be a lot to get done that day. And I guess I'm trying to understand whether we have to consider any changes to our schedule. I don't need an answer right at this moment, but I just wanted to get a sense of that, because I gathered that either that or special dispensation from the state on the deadline. Because if it turns out that our vote is going to be in October, you'll need time. Those forms require a lot of information.
I hear, do you mind, let us go back and consider the dates and the forms and everything, so I can report back to the board on this one?
That is absolutely fine. I just wanted to point it out for both the public and the board members, in case we do have to make changes, that would be the reason why. Okay, Kina.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I guess just two big questions. One, and it knows the trend for many of the centers, which is pretty congruent with other municipalities as well, is that midday is the better attended time, I would say, for casting a ballot. With that being said, is traffic during that time pretty heavy to the point that we have suggested people to come back at different times? Or do we accommodate by having more staff present to take in the influx of people midday? I also found it kind of interesting that a lot of some of the places that were closer to metro stops didn't have higher numbers between, I would say, 4 to 8 p.m. as I suspected. So that last question might be better for a different conversation, but my question right now is more specific to, are we accommodating the jump midday by having more staff around?
If I may answer this, I understand the question. For me, I have to go by the numbers.
Mhm.
So if you, for example, look at the EV14 Bower Drive Community Recreation Center, because that's slide 69, that center follows the pattern like every other in
Right.
terms of jump, 11, 12 o'clock, 1 p.m., 2 p.m. But we are talking about 40 or 50 voters per hour. So it's, sorry. And if you consider the total allocation that I have to go back and look, for example, for the Bower Drive, but I would say that we have at least 6 to 8 checking stations and things like that. There will be no wait time.
Okay.
I understand that things do happen in life. We could have I worked at one polling place when one retirement community brought 3 buses of their residents to vote in the same time, and the wait times were created. But these are exceptional circumstances, and we cannot staff just for that possible occasion. But we have to go by the number. So the graph shows the jump, but the jump, total jump in terms of the number is not high. That would not be, that the allocated stat would not be able to address it.
Boris, if you were looking at Silver Spring instead of Bower Drive,
Okay.
I mean, obviously Silver Spring would be more highly staffed than Bower Drive, but I'm just saying that the numbers wouldn't be 40 per hour, they'd be much higher, I would assume.
That's correct. But again, let me just oh my God. As you rightly pointed, Dave, so location does matter.
Mhm.
Habit that people have developed does matter when they choose early voting site. That's why I believe that, for example, White Oak the numbers will just go up as we go from one election to another, not necessarily stay this low. But I like the fact that David brought up Silver Spring, and he correctly indicated that staffing level, allocation of the equipment, and the organization of the early voting site in Silver Spring is designed to accommodate the higher numbers, because Silver Spring is always high frequency, high traffic early voting site.
Kina, do you have anything else?
No, that takes care of my question, Mr. President. Thank you, Boris, and thank
No
you.
Okay, Daniel.
I just wanted to be very quick. Boris, thank you so much for actually highlighting that, sticking to the data really helps informing in filling out all those variables when it comes to staffing, equipment, and everything that is needed. So therefore, even though at a certain period, there will be something that looks like, okay, it's really slow. However, when you average it out, what we're trying to achieve is to make sure that we don't have excessive wait time. Again, this is just for the good of the public. Is that some of the reason why you're putting this data together so that people not only can make informed decision on when to go to vote early, or for us as a board to not say, well, you know, how do you shrink the resources that you place in one center than the other?
I know that my wishes and staff wishes, and I know that board historically is very determined in making sure that we do not have wait times at any point of voting. When it comes to early voting, we run a dashboard on our website which informs general public about any wait time, if there is any, at any early voting site during any of those 8 days of early voting. My hope, based on today's presentation, is that we will, going forward, we will continue our messaging, and Gilberto did quite a bit of that before, telling everyone, consult our website, because the website will tell you what the wait times are. Historically, the lowest turnout is from 7 to 10 a.m. in the morning. The best days to utilize early voting is on weekends, because historically Montgomery County voters do not choose to vote early during those weekends. So I believe this will be all the messages that we will promote going forward, not necessarily to equally distribute the turnout among the election days, but to make sure that everyone has the best experience possible voting. So our goal is not to have wait times, and I think that we provide sufficient data to voters to make an educated decision when to go and utilize their right.
That's such a great point, Boris, because I mean, I know for many, voting is a family experience, right? So, you know, many people take family members, we plan time, we take our children. Well, I don't have little children anymore, but the goal is that we want to make sure that we all go and vote. And so this data is very informative, and I agree with you that what you and the staff has done in providing this information on the website really helps families schedule their time when it's time for them to vote. So thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Okay, are there any other questions for Boris or Mindy? Are we gonna see Mindy before this presentation is over?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I'm like, where's Mindy?
Sorry, I hijacked the presentation by myself completely, so I
You totally
apologize.
hide Mindy?
I allowed him to hijack it. I've been-
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure that you weren't being held hostage there. So,
Please explain.
I've been battling a summer cold for 3.5 weeks. So Boris, you know, decided it was easier for him to speak than it is for me. Right now.
okay, well, we didn't mean to make you speak, but thank you for all of your work and for saying hi.
It's good to
Thanks.
see you.
Okay, anything else from anyone else on this subject? Okay, so let's move to the next presentation, which is the outreach presentation with Dr. Zelaya.
Listen, let me bring the screen up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and PowerPoint. You have to pick up.
Yeah, he may need to unshare his.
Sorry.
Okay. Let's see, can you see? Good afternoon. Are you able to see the PowerPoint?
No,
Nope.
we are only able to see you at the moment.
Let's share this. I'll share it.
Although I gather you are sitting in the same room with everybody else.
Share screen. Share. How about now?
Now it's, yes. now
There we
can.
are.
Yes,
There we
there
Good
we
afternoon,
are.
everyone.
Now you just have to
Welcome
put it
back
in
to our
slideshow.
board
Welcome to
members and
the-
especially our new community advocates who have joined the Montgomery County Board of Elections. I'm Gilberto Zelaya. I've been out on vacation, came back a couple of weeks back, energized and ready to engage. Let me see. Can you hear me?
Yes. But
Can
I
you hear
think-
me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can, Dr. Z.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, I hear you now. Okay. Thank you. So let me go here. Yeah. I'm just trying to start the slideshow. Okay. So here's our community presentation regarding engagement with Montgomery County cultural, multi-dimensional, multi-generational community and voting electorate. And so as it pertains to outreach, our goal is to ensure that we are accessible, that we are transparent, and that we are welcoming. Let me see, let me move this picture here. Right. As you see, there's two aspects. We have the traditional outreach that we spoke briefly, Boris did with the board, and then we have the digital outreach, and we'll get into that as well. For 2022, we had about 182 events across Montgomery County, and we collaborated with 107 organizations. Some of our sample partners, so we work closely with all of them. They're outstanding advocates. They buttress and they amplify our voice so we can hear and serve our voters. A couple of the samples, I'm not going to name them all, but they know, and I want to express my gratitude for just being accessible and for welcoming, in providing the opportunity for us to engage their constituents or participants of their corresponding organizations and or programs. We both work with nonprofit organizations, faith-based, business, both large and small, also state governments, county government, specifically public libraries, recreation, etc., but also local municipalities like City of Gaithersburg, City of Rockville. And also, we also work closely with HOAs, civic associations, organizations such as Strathmore, and a lot of multicultural and also special needs organizations. We want to make sure that we turn every stone and we work with everyone, because at the end of the day, we are here to serve and we are charged to protect every individual's voting rights. So now we're going to get into virtual outreach. Obviously, COVID introduced a new type of outreach. The traditional obviously is the table and the banners, flyers, handouts, doing presentation, working with the multifaceted community. But with COVID, we needed to start leveraging some of the technologies that were starting to start being implemented, like Zoom, Teams, Facebook Live, etc. Kind of the outreach summary as it pertains to virtual. We had 72 sessions in 2022 with 49 organizations. This is a listing of some of those organizations. Once again, they reflect the kaleidoscope of organizations that we work in Montgomery County and in Maryland. We look at the different communities and we answer to their call. They will reach out to me and they'll be very specific about what type of information they want. But it's also the opportunity to really engage, to inform them of the process from A to Z. We work with academia, faith-based, Montgomery College. There's a whole gamut, there's a long list. I want to be the first one to thank those that I listed off the top of my head, but there's a large list of organizations that we work and that we lean on to assist to amplify our voice. So as it pertains to outreach information, voter registration, of course, one of the pillars is the actual process of registering to vote and voter maintenance. But beyond that, there's a multitude of different topics that we bring to the public and in different formats and different forums. How to register to vote, obviously update your voter registration, same day registration, how to leverage that, when to leverage that, the 3 ways to vote, especially with the upcoming presidential primaries. The Maryland has closed party primaries, so we want to communicate that as well. Obviously, we have a large percentage of unaffiliated voters. We want to make sure that they understand that there is a ballot for them. There's kind of that myth that there's nothing for them to vote, but there is. School board, a nonpartisan contest. Also, our needs continuously recruit poll workers, both monolingual and bilingual, and or maybe even trilingual. We have a very diverse county. I know I don't need to preach to the choir regarding that. Montgomery County usually has 4 to 5 of the most diverse cities in America for the last couple of decades. And so we do recognize that as well. We embrace it. Looking at recruiting not only bilingual poll workers, election workers, but also high school students, Republican and unaffiliated. Also the importance that we also discuss on returning any mail address to someone else that's not in that facility, in that apartment, townhome, home, etc. Future Vote is one of our pillars that we've been able to leverage. We're one of the, and I say this with pride, one of the few organizations, actually almost the only, that bring in students as young as middle school to participate in the process, to expose them regarding participatory democracy. And I'll get into that. And we have at least 2 board members now that have their children who participated in said program, who are now adults and part of the voting public. Once again, special need voting, the difference between web delivery, mail-in ballot, how to use a sample ballot, and also the introduction of kind of leveraging technology to bring information to the masses. Obviously, there's a fine balance between paper and pen, but also QR codes, texting, and apps. Talk about the Canvas, that's an education piece that it's very important that the public understands as part of the process. And provision of voting safeguards, why it's important for individuals to have take ownership of their voter maintenance, and also how provisional voting, are safeguards for both the voter and for the organization. As I mentioned, we've received numerous awards. These are the 2 or 3 top ones, but we've received awards from municipalities, from the state, from other national organizations, but we did receive one for multicultural election preparation in the 21st century some years ago. And recently in 2020, the National Associations of Counties also recognized Montgomery County for leveraging community partnerships and leveraging different avenues and the resources to engage our electorate. Now we're going to go into Future Vote. And Future Vote is a program which I started in 2003. Once I joined the Board of Elections in 2002, Montgomery County Board of Elections received a consent decree from the Department of Justice. Part of it was to create an engagement campaign, a grassroots aggressive engagement campaigns where we went to the communities to ask what they need from us. In that, I noticed that there was a missed opportunity to engage a young electorate, but even an electorate that's yet to register to vote or to participate in the process. Obviously, after 2 decades, we are reaping the benefit that we have this direct connection with our future voters. And that's the whole premise of this program. I like this picture because I want to plug in my kids. Those are 2 of mine. Those are my sons, Sebastian and Julian. And the reason I show you this is because I practice what I preach. Sebastian, he was sometime in middle school, demonstrating the voting equipment at one of the camps. We work closely with Director Stowe at the Office of Human Rights, and they have a youth camp at the YMCA every summer, and we joined them. These are my sons just alphabetizing some of the Future Vote applications, and I show this because before it was all paper-based, but we have leveraged the module and systems in place to facilitate the recruitment of close to 2,000 students to participate in the program. Here he is in middle school serving at St. Catherine's. I believe that's St. Catherine's, or that's probably one of the other early voting locations. And moving forward, doing the demonstrations. And at the end, the whole premise of the program is once these students pass through middle school into high school, they serve as poll workers. Sebastian will be voting for the first time this year, and Julian will be serving as a poll worker as well in the presidential primary elections. And so the whole mission, obviously, of Future Vote is to ensure that we increase current and future voter knowledge. Just because you're registered to vote does not make you an expert. And there's a lot that goes on in the whole process of becoming an active voter. Also strengthen ties related to civic participation, which is key in engaging the electorate and preserving participatory democracy. And whether that's changed from early voting in the beginning of the onset, you needed a reason to vote by mail, AKA absentee voting. That has changed to early voting when we started with 5 early voting centers. We have technically in the 22 election, 14, and also the advent of leveraging mail-in voting, which was also known as absentee. So the future breakdown on average for a particular election since 2004, I've worked with over 47,000 students, 47,500, 35,000 families. And I like this picture because if you look at this image, you just don't have the student, you also have the guardian, and the gentleman on the left side has a child. And it's open to everyone. And I know President Naaman and Vice President Karoma have attended with their children in Future Vote. It's a family affair. It's an opportunity to educate both the guardian, but also the student about the process. We've also since then had over 100,000 community service hours. One of the requirements to graduate in a Montgomery County Public School or in Maryland is 75 community service hours called SSL, the infamous Student Service Learning Credits. So that's an opportunity to engage these students in their interests. On average, it's almost 50-50. Sometimes it fluctuates, so it's more female than male. But on average, it's almost like a 50-50 breakdown. And with the middle school, usually it's higher, usually about 65 to 72% or middle school, and it kind of tapers out. The reason is by the time the student reaches 16 years of age, we encourage them to register to vote as long as they meet the requirements. And then also we encourage them to serve as poll workers. So it kind of tapers off once they hit 11th and 12th grade. The breakdown ethnicity, it also fluctuates 1 or 2% depending on the elections. We look at this and we try to target communities to make sure that there's even representation. We like these numbers to represent the actual demographic of Montgomery County. And so we work with our partners to implement and to promote the opportunity for students to participate in the program. Some of the tasks that the future voters will do during the Monday precinct setup, prior to showing up, they must attend a training session and orientation. And then on Monday, they'll sign the rosters, they discuss allergies with the chief judges, and they assist the chief judges as instructed. They get familiar with the polling place, the restrooms. They note the precinct phone numbers for the parents only for emergency. It's not to be used to find out if Bobby or Maria had breakfast or not. It's just in case if there's a family emergency, they have access to the chief judge. Obviously, be polite and smile, those soft skills that they will need in the future, acknowledge the voters, provide information, and really follow the instructions by the election judges on election day or during early voting. There's always 2 students per shift. The shifts are between 3 to 4 hours, depending on the election. They encourage, they issue and they distribute the I voted sticker, encourage our voters to serve as poll workers or future vote ambassadors. A lot of times they'll see a young child and they'll ask, how did you sign up for this? And they will sign up. Or if they see a lot of younger high school students serving in the check-in as a full-fledged election worker, they may ask, I have a child at home that has an interest, and I'm gonna see if they would like to participate. They will sign up as well. They distribute nonpartisan literature, and they make sure that only literature or information from the Montgomery County Board of Elections or the state Board of Elections are on the information table. They collect and recycle pens, the privacy sleeves, they'll run them back to the check-in table. They keep the entrance and exits clear. They indicate the restrooms. It's kind of all the incidentals. At no time do they touch ballots or equipment. They do not go near there. They have no permission. That's only for our trained poll workers. The topics at the orientation is the difference between early voting and election day, provisional ballot prevention, vote by mail, voter maintenance, leveraging sample ballot, the closed primary, section 203, and those nationalization requirements, how that ties in. And a lot of the topics that were discussed before are also discussed during the orientation. And one of the tenets of the program is the fact that we have one of the pillars is recruiting high school poll workers. We visit all the high schools in Montgomery County. We try to reach out also to the parochial school. One of the challenges with parochial and private school is that they have school on election day. So what we'll do is we'll work with them, and a lot of times the students may or may not, but usually the interest will be during our early voting, the weekends, because they have school on that particular Tuesday. We've promoted and or recruited over 10,000 high school students, age 16 and older. One of the benefits of the program, when the program started, the average age you need to be 18 to be a registered voter. And I saw that trend, and that's one of the rationales why I started the program, because as they lowered the age, we were establishing the program within the school system. So now that the average age has been lowered to 16 some years back, we were in a strategic position to really buttress the interests of the students, but also our interests to serve our voters. These students are bilingual or trilingual or monolingual. They're tech savvy. They wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is they touch this, and they're really good at balanced energy. They know their community. One of the benefits is because these students, remember, the elementary, middle, and high school is kind of a feeder kind of system. And so the students who are in high school that we recruit are from the communities in which they live and they serve. And if you look at a Gaithersburg High School or a Whitman or a Bethesda Chevy Chase, the students really reflect the community, but also the language needs of those communities. And these students are bilingual. So when we recruit them, we're actually recruiting bilingual, monolingual, trilingual students that actually reflect the community in which their parents vote in their particular precincts. The language competency between each precinct varies. So about 25 to 45% of the students have language competency, and that's a benefit as it pertains to recruiting Spanish-speaking election judges, but also we embrace all of the 150 languages spoken in the school system. So we also reaping the benefits of serving our voters by recruiting these students. This is a picture of the 2022 in Germantown. You see here, there are about 2, 4, 6, 8 students. There was actually 3 more. And these all were 17 and under. So the average age of the poll workers there was very low. This was an early voting. This was during the weekend. Like I said, they're tech savvy. They know their community. They welcome the voters by first name basis. The voters are happy that they're there, and they're proud to the fact that you have this young generation participating side by side with our adult election workers. These are 2 students who helped us out recruit students at Montgomery College and Tacoma Park. They served at the Mid-County Community Center, and they're going to come back. They're actually students at Maryland. They recently finished their AA in 2022, but we've been in contact. We're going to do some more recruiting and outreach with them. So when you look at the election, the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, they have a comprehensive survey that they sent out to all the local boards of elections. And the 2022, and this is great, if you look at these numbers, the average age of our poll workers compared from the US, Maryland, and Montgomery County. We have a young poll worker force, a young electorate. It's reflective in what we do in the community. It's reflective in the relationship we have with academia, with different organizations such as Identity that work with Latino youth, or the Alpha Kappa Alphas that do a lot of with historical Black universities and colleges. They do outreach within the college career centers in each of the high schools. So if you look at the percentage of the age and the breakdown, it reflects what we've been doing as it pertains to engagement. Also, if you look at the breakdown between the ages of 16 to 25, for example, if you look at that, if the US is 5.9, Maryland is 5.7, our poll worker force, 25 and under, is hitting 15%. I think that speaks volumes to the efforts that our team does in the community. And then if you look at the average age, on average in the US, it's about 61 or above, depending on the locality. In Montgomery County, it's 54. We do have a young poll worker force. And I think it's a good direct reflection with the relationship that we work with organizations, not just in the school system, but with different entities. Moving forward, we got an award in 2007, Achievement Award with NACO for the Future Vote Initiative, serving as a catalyst, obviously, for tomorrow's voters. We also got an award from the Election Assistance Commission in 2020 or 2022, 18, sorry, I can't see the slide, regarding recruitment and training, because one of the things that I'm seeing, and I get a lot of antidote from our trainers, is a student so-and-so says hi, they were at, say, Whitman or Bethesda, at Clarksburg, they graduated from college and they're back. and they're serving back as a poll worker. So one thing I'm seeing is a lot of 20 and mid 20-year-old former future vote alumni, as I'm going to call them, coming back to serve as poll workers because they're back at home. So that's a benefit I didn't see moving forward when I started this program 2 decades ago. So now I'm aging myself. So these students now are coming back. And I think that's the benefit to the organization, but also to our voters. And I got an award from the International Association of Governmental Officials. I was a keynote speaker, and we talked about engagement and the missed opportunity for engaging not only students in high school, but also engaging students in middle schools, which, a lot of, they do not engage them for whatever reason. But I think there's a lot of benefit that you're able to work with these students and grow them through the franchise. Now, modernization. Now, in 2019, 2018, 2019, we started to look at SMS texting, and it was in its infancy. And then with the 2020 election, it was really, it really helped us out because we're trying to figure out ways to engage with the community when outreach was at nil. So some of the outcomes, over 40,000 messages were received for information using our SMS texting. These are the commands both in English and Spanish. We have everything from registering to vote, reviewing your registration, request a mail-in application, sign up to be a poll worker, identifying the nearest drop box, the address and driving directions, and also the nearest early voting center, which is directions and wait time. So that's a good tool to use before heading out of your home. We got an award for that as well from the Election Assistance Commission by leveraging the SMS short code texting, and we still use it. Now, Montgomery County Votes app, we have an app for those that don't know, and for those who are on this call, on this session. We had over 67,000 downloads, and in 2020 we had it was about 5,000, 6,000. We were implementing and COVID happened, but we really pushed the messaging on using the app. I think it's a great tool. It gives you a lot of information. It's basically everything on our website in your hands. Very simple to use, big buttons, big fonts, and it's just really straightforward. From early voting location, how to identify your precinct, early voting, election poll worker, FAQs, future vote FAQs, how to request, how to register to vote, how to request a mail-in ballot, rooming control, which is a web page on the State Board of Elections. We also added a public transportation planner. So if you're using public transportation, you could kind of coordinate your day around voting, either early voting or on election day, or identifying the nearest drop box and looking forward, looking how to get to that location on public transportation. Once again, we got an award for that as well in 2020 for leveraging. It was timely with COVID, and it was a great tool to initiate. And in 2022, it took off. And then Facebook, I just selected Facebook because we have a good presence. We had 97,000 impressions, which means that they engage with our posting, with our web page. And that's important because once you marriage kind of the top 4 between texting, MoCo Votes, Facebook, and then Google Ads, well, we had over 900,000 impressions. So when you do a search on early voting, we will be either the top 2 search outcomes. And when an individual clicks on it, you have the impression to get the information that they need, and that mitigates some of the calls into the office. And if you take those top 4 that I just selected as it pertains to impression, you're talking about over 1 million. And one of the things that helped with these impressions, buttress, is by branding. In 2020, one thing that I decided to do is kind of brand, because we had a lot of differing, not necessarily the messaging, but the look. And so when it's either a posting, an ad in one of our ethnic newspapers, depending on the language, whether it's in Spanish and Korean, the information, the fonts are simple, large print. It gets more challenging when you want to promote the early voting centers, obviously, but it still has that look, that banner on the left side, information. We always try to incorporate also the texting, the prompts. So individuals get information. We try to do the banners also on our homepage, large, simple, and also incorporate that in our sample ballot. So there's kind of a uniform branding look. even in our handouts. We work closely with a lot of organizations, and during COVID, there was the COVID boxes with food and the bag pickup, and we would put literature and information that was timely, but they're always reflected the election calendar. So once the voter registration deadline has passed, then some of the little messaging would fluctuate with the calendar itself. And also when we go to the high schools, Montgomery College, and different fairs, and whatever posting we have also on our webpage, we try to kind of brand it together with that same look so it's recognizable. And or in our bus placards that were very popular that we're going to continue to leverage. Also promoting the texting, and we will also promote the app. Now, paperless outreach, what's new? As Boris alluded, talking about the QR codes. The QR codes are very simple. The benefits, you could easily scan a QR code and information instantaneous on your cell phone. When you text, you have to actively text, say the word vote to 77788. You have to wait for the text and then you act on it. With the QR code, you scan it and the information is on your cell phone. It's also time consuming copying a URL. A lot of times you may see the whole URL spelled out and it's just / someone on the bus taking the T6 in Aspen Hill. It's going to be very difficult for you to type that information. If you just scan the QR code, you get the information, you can act on it later or there while you're on your bus ride. Another also great thing about the QR code is it mitigates the abysmal handwriting. My child, guilty, yes, abysmal handwriting. A lot of times we went to high schools and we collected poll worker applications. Sometimes we couldn't ascertain if that was an L or an I or a P. It's just the handwriting because, population, everything is on screens. And so by mitigating that, we did a little pilot. So from the outreaches for the last 6 months, we received about 220 paper applications for election worker submissions, but QR codes was over 1,000. And so that also helps at the office because we don't now have to input the information from a piece of paper to our module. We could just transfer the data that's provided by the voter. And thank you. I know there's a lot of information thrown at you. I feel that in the last 2 decades, we tried to leverage technology, incorporate it, but never pushing away the old paper and pen because we have a very diverse electorate, not just by age, but also by ethnicity and also by needs. So we want to make sure that we're there to respond to all of their needs.
Okay, thank you very much, Alberto. I see, I see a few board members are going to have questions. Daniel, we'll start with you.
Well, just wanted to first of all say I like the pancake suit that you had there at the end. But more importantly, again, want to recognize not only your work, but the entire staff work. Highlighting future vote, as you noted, my son participated. So for all this, for disclosure, and it's I think it's one of the programs that we really need to make sure not only continues but also continue to be recognized as well. What's your vision? I mean, you've just laid out an amazing work when it comes to outreach. And I know this firsthand because not only you've done, outreach in our diverse community, but you've also trained workers. I remember when I was in a different capacity where you came in, people who wanted to register others to vote within a community group, you went and did that training as well. I think my question now would be, this is a lot, right? You've just given us a lot. How can we help you? Because I can almost say a lot of people don't know, not even half of this, right? How can we as a board amplify this message where we'll be able to not only encourage people to participate, but be more intentional to say, okay, here are the ABC places that we can make an impact. Because I don't think duplicating what you just did, we'll be fooling ourselves as board members if we want to recreate the system. Let me just be clear about that from my standpoint. What I'm looking for is just amplifying this. So let me stop there for now. How can we amplify the things you are doing?
I think the biggest one is also supporting the agency and buttressing our staffing needs. As Boris mentioned, our vacancies, also buttressing our ability to onboard temps. One of the things that's always been a challenge when it comes to outreach is it's difficult to hire someone who will want to work 10 to 8 hours a week, 6 hours a week. And as we start gaining momentum and as we near the primaries, we naturally get a lot of requests from our partners. And a lot of things what we do is we work closely with our recruiters. So for example, if we have ex-recruiter who says, I have a deficiency in, let's say, the Bethesda Chevy Chase area, then what I'll do is I go in my, Rolodex and I look for those partners in that specific area, whether it's the libraries, the school system, urban partnership, the Bethesda Urban Partnership, and we start creating events around that need here to serve our voters. So definitely the temps is where we need to buttress and to fortify those needs to bring in the staff to onboard when needed. I know that we have a budget of about $70,000 give and take for multicultural media. I know that we tried to expand on that, but we still have this 73,000 plus. We're going to continue to amplify that as much as we can. That's another avenue where we could, as you know, the metropolitan area like New York, Chicago, LA is very expensive. And so we're spending our $73,000 while the national central committees or interest groups or lobbying groups are spending millions. And so, we're looking at the finite opportunity. And I think the establishment during the cannabis, we got visited by a lot of press and we have a lot of relationship with the press and they give us a lot of coverage. And that there's not a cost tied to it because we're not paying for those services, but they come to us because we are transparent in the process of educating our electorate. And also leveraging social media with the little videos and the live streams and giving all those little antidotes of behind the scenes that a lot of organizations do not do. We have a large following outside of Montgomery County because we get into the nooks and crannies about ballot distribution. What is the staff doing now? What happens, the life of a mail-in ballot. We do all these little anecdotes. So short end is buttressing the staff, onboarding our temps. Hopefully in the next budget cycle, we could, encourage the council to expand on our media budget because it's just an expensive avenue. And I think those will be the three kind of wish lists that I would like for the board to work on and to support us.
Well, let me ask, before you go on, Daniel, let me just make sure I understand something. Gilberto, about the staffing needs, are you referring to staff specifically for outreach?
No, so what we do is the onboarding of the team in general, because as we go out in the community and we generate interest, it also generates work for our team. And so our team, they have a calendar. So we work closely hand in hand with the nursing home program, with voter registration, with the mail-in.
But how big is your team?
So our team is about 4 individuals, not including me. And then as we get closer to the election cycle, we onboard the recruiters. And so Chris and her team, Aisha, they will onboard those individuals. I help out in the hiring of those temps. But those individuals have also a task of assisting in outreach. So like I said, if there's an event in Gaithersburg, we will leverage the corresponding recruiter and an outreach team member or myself to go out to, let's say, Kentland's Day, Oktoberfest. Because the rationale is.
So there's a team of 4 who are full-time. Plus you.
They're like, I call them like outreach mercenaries as I need them, right? Because depending on the outreach events, right? So tomorrow there's 2 events. So I have leaned on 2 members to cover those events. Those events are 2 hours.
I'm still having a hard time and you're asking us to help improve staffing, which, as you know, I've been saying for a long time, I want to help improve staffing for the whole board, not just for outreach, but I'm just trying to understand for outreach. It sounds like there's your staff, but when you said 4 people, that's not 4 FTEs?
No.
So how many FTEs are there?
Explain that. Boris could explain this.
So it's I cannot calculate full-time equivalents from the top of my head here.
So just tell me how
As
many
Gilberto
hours
says,
the 4 people are working.
and as I reported in my director's report, temporary outreach support staff is available when needed, or we invite them when we need them. And that need is very much based on the events, outreach events, festivals, street events, culinary concerts, or whatever when we are attending something. So we can plan 10 hours a week, but in reality, there might be weeks where they will just serve 2 to 3 hours. There might be weeks that they will serve 12. Again, we cannot plan a street festival, music street festival in Rockville. We are just the participants there. We cannot control it. So it's very hard for me to give a full-time equivalent.
All I'm trying to understand
we can look
is,
historically how many hours they served, but it's as Gilberto said, this is the challenging part to hire these team members. Someone has to be willing to be on call to serve anywhere from 2 to 12 hours a week at this period of the year.
so do
And,
we have
He has
anybody?
a limited number of team members who've been working with him for a while, and this is the core of the staff that we rely on when we go out to do the outreach events.
Do we have anybody other than Gilberto who works on outreach on a full-time basis, or is everybody a temporary who is working that varied hour schedule like you're saying?
I'm sorry, Dave, I didn't hear at the very beginning.
I'm trying to understand. We were just asked to help improve hiring in this area. I'm trying to understand what we're doing now in order to understand what we would ask for. And it sounds like I'm still a little bit confused by it, because it sounds like we also use recruiters to do outreach. And the recruiters are also temporary. So I'm trying just to get a sense as to when we're being asked, to assist with that. And, I'm already fully on board, and I know many of my colleagues are too in both parties for making sure that we have sufficient staffing for the Board of Elections. But I'm trying to understand what we have now in terms of, Gilberto said 4 people. Those are 4 people you can call on when you need them, or and they work anywhere from 2 to 10 hours a week, or varying based on how many events there are.
Correct.
And those 4 people, none of them work more, even half-time, it sounds like.
Currently correct. As we near their primaries, their hours could reach up to 30. As we get closer to the, let's say, about a month before the voter registration deadline, there's a lot of popularity in what we do. And once the candidates' promotional materials start hitting the post office, and you start seeing the different candidate forms, then that's when the interest will come to us from different organizations, different avenues. When I mentioned buttressing the agency's process of hiring, as mentioned, when we hire the support staff for the election worker suite, part of their deliverables is to assist with outreach. That's one of their deliverables, one of their tasks. So when I'm talking about buttressing outreach through the efforts of onboarding these individuals, not necessarily I need to hire 2 to 3 full-time outreach individuals. It's just very difficult. We tried that years ago, and it's very difficult because, with the advent of the economy, inflation, you will find an incredible ambassador. And when you tell them it could range from 2 to 20 hours, and as you get closer, they're like, oh, okay, they'll say yes at the moment, but the minute a full-time opportunity occur, or there's even a part-time that's continuous 20 hours, they would resign. And I understand there's needs at home. But I think buttressing the onboarding of staff from the election worker suite will then support the needs that I have in our division and serving our voters at these community events.
So when you talked about buttressing the agency's hiring, you're not talking about asking for more people, or we are talking about asking for more people?
Answer.
Okay, what we are asking for, either we can talk about more people or we can talk more full-time equivalents. Basically, hiring people, preferably who could be multi-talented, so they can be used across different sections, so we can
Right.
provide them more hours,
Right.
so we can keep them on the payroll to be available for Dr. Z and his team to go out do the outreach, but also help other sections.
Okay, so
In
the
a
idea would
perfect
be,
world,
the idea would
that
be
would
to
be the
hire.
course of action.
So,
I'm not sure to which extent we are currently competitive to attract that kind of labor force, but that will be our goal. Any increased hiring means more budget for, requires increased budget for temporary staff.
okay. Daniel, back to you.
I yield. I see some of my colleagues' hands up.
Okay, Ami.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I guess I don't understand entirely the allocation of hours. I don't know how you all track the actions of your staff. Is there a timesheet that gets filled out? I mean, I'm back on the people stuff. Is there a timesheet that gets filled out so you know how many of your staff spend hours doing outreach versus hours doing other stuff?
Yes. There's a cost code tied to outreach.
Okay, well then, I guess my question would be, how many actual hours are spent on outreach of the whole staff and including the temporary staff in a year? It would be nice, I think it would be helpful for the board to get an understanding of how time is allocated across the functions and what you actually allocate for, say, the past year, and what you would like to have for the next year, so we can understand what functions are the ones that are most in need. I think that would help us with our understanding of how to push for more staff for you all. It would certainly help me. Now, let me get back, though, to the outreach. I was very impressed with the program, Gilberto. I think that was, a very good comprehensive program. I have a couple of quick questions, though. One of the diversities of our county that you didn't touch on was political diversity. And I know in our canvas, for example, and perhaps in our election judges, we're short of Republicans. And to some extent, we're short of independents, but we're clearly short of Republican people to work the polls and to do the appropriate things where we need bipartisan or dual partisan work. Are you doing any particular outreach to that community?
Yes. We strategically work with the partisan groups, both the Republican. We actually several. So there's an echo.
Boris, please mute your microphone.
Okay.
Thank you.
We about 2 months ago, we did a large voter registrar engagement training session with the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee. And I believe we had close to 40 individuals from both the chair and the vice chair, and they participated. And we did have a very cordial conversation about moving forward. And I challenged them, because I even said that. And I remember, if you look at the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee website, in gist, I was saying that's a lot of Republicans in this room, right? And it was, and I told them, I need for you to help me identify it. I know each and every one of you on the every finger in both hands, 10 individual that you could reach out to see if you can help us recruit those individuals to serve as poll workers. And if they can't, they're too busy, they must know at least 5 individuals that they could reach out. Also told both the chair and vice chair that I am available 24/7. And I did tell them that in the fall, I'm going to poke their ribs because I do want to leverage their newsletters and some of their social media to start engaging in recruiting registered Republicans, not just for the canvas, but for the poll worker, but also
Yeah.
to amplify our messages.
Well, okay, may I make another suggestion? One of the active cadres in the Montgomery County Republican circles are the women's clubs. And there are 5 of them.
Mhm.
And there might be a way for you to reach out to, I mean, I can send you a list of the chairs if you don't have them. There might be a way for you to reach out and make a presentation. You know, they all have monthly meetings, and they might be willing to give you, X minutes to make a presentation.
Yes, and actually, so I could share. So I've done 2 large. I believe there was about not 2020, 2018. The Potomac Women's Republican Club. There's probably 115 people at Normandy Farms.
Right.
And we did a voter registrar. But yes, but still send me that list because I know that the chairs change.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree
I
with
will
you.
take that. I will take that action. I will send you a list with the
Thank you.
contact information. And that may help.
May I ask a question of you?
Sure.
You're familiar with these organizations. Do you
Yes.
think that for in order to have the kind of maximum outreach, does it help, hurt, or make no difference to have Republican members of our board be part of that presentation as well? Because I would think that most people respond to people they know.
I'd be happy to come and introduce you then, Gilberto, if I mean, I don't think that would hurt. I don't think it's a requirement, but it certainly wouldn't hurt. And I am actually an adjunct member of the 4 clubs that I'm not a full member in. So I'd be happy to do that. But I think from the point of view of political action, it is appropriate for you to reach out and get it set up rather than for me to be an intermediary in actually making it happen. I would feel uncomfortable playing that role particularly. But I'm happy to come and introduce you.
I got it covered. Send me the information. Part of my deliverables for the Montgomery County Board of Elections, one of the reasons I was hired is to do just that. Just as I've asked in the past, if you have, as we all know, everyone on the screen is well connected.
Yeah.
Okay, and we cross paths. If you know of an organization, of an event, of a club, no matter if it's 5 people or 5,000, send me the information. I will contact them because I was hired to do so, and I will contact them and I will set it up. My job is to serve not only the public, but also if there's information you can share with me to facilitate my access to those individuals, I will gladly do it. We've been doing this. We've had a relationship, at least as long as I've been here. I know that the relationship with the Board of Elections and these organizations go beyond my over 2 decades. But please send me the information.
Okay.
And as it pertains to the day-to-day operations of outreach and engagement, I'm here to serve.
All right, excellent. I will certainly get that to you. All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, Kina.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Dr. Zelaya, thank you so much for the presentation. I am coming from a background of community engagement. I'm truly impressed by the work that your office is doing and able to handle the number of recruitment events that you're able to schedule in a year's time with the limited staff that you have is certainly noticed very much by me. In my day job, I work with about a staff of 2 to take care of just slightly under the number that you have right now. So I know you guys are very tired, but I really appreciate the outreach that you've done so far and you continue to do. With that being said, one of the questions I had mostly was just about your attrition for the Future Vote program. Obviously, you've had great success of people coming into the program and staying, as you said, from middle school into high school. I was wondering about the attrition when it comes to from high school to them becoming an election judge or election or a poll worker. I don't know. And I only asked because I did not specifically see that number, not to say that you don't have that number available. And if it's a question that has to happen offline, I'm more than happy to talk about it later. I just was curious about that.
I'd
No,
like to hear the answer. So
Yeah, and
let's not do it offline.
no, and that's one of my wish lists with the module. So the module itself, as it pertains for Future Vote, which prior to 2012, it was predominantly Excel spreadsheets and paper applications. And then the module, the way it works, in order for me to manage close to 2,000 students per election, the guardians themselves open the accounts. They provide their information, their child's information. They also select the training date and location. We have about 5 to 6, depending on the size of how many we recruit. And they also select the precinct and the shift accordingly. And so I give the power to the guardians to select. So now moving forward, as it pertains to attrition, as these students age in the program, I'm going to say promote them, because we want to register them to vote, encourage them. Because once the student says, I don't need SSL, I want, the stipend, and
Right.
it also buttresses their application for college, then that's where I need some assistance as it pertains with collecting the data. We have the information, but it's just a matter of sitting down and kind of working with the aggregate from the previous election to see how many of those students were converted to poll workers. It could be done. It's just a matter of creating some Excel spreadsheets and then working with the modules. I've always wanted to look at that, but to be honest, because of the time constraints, it's just been one of those things where I pushed it to the wayside because there's other focuses I need to look at. But I agree with you. So yeah, I'll look at what I could crunch to see if I could pull some aggregate from the 2022 election.
Okay.
What's unique in 2020 was the only election year that we did not implement Future Vote, obviously because of COVID and the fear. We have a lot of young students that live with extended family members, and I did not want to expose their grandparents or any family members with any immune deficiency challenges by exposing them to COVID during the election cycle. But that's the only election that we did not implement Future Vote.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you for sharing. Again, I completely understand how that is something that's a great value add to understanding your data, and just it's sometimes really hard to get to. I was even considering how there might be a world where either a temporary staff worker or I guess maybe even an intern in some instance could help with pulling that information together for you all. I'm sure that would also bode well for us in terms of branding, to show how committed we are as a community to keeping our voters in the system, because we'll have the data to back it up. Because you mentioned obviously media before, and media loves having data to create a narrative, and what better narrative to create than one where our attrition rates are just astounding, and I'm sure they are. So I'm looking forward to seeing those numbers one day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Absolutely. So,
Can we make that one day sometime soon? Like, how hard is that how hard is that data to obtain?
I know you're
Not to
asking.
I'm asking Dr. Z.
Yes.
Let me talk to Janet and the team to see what we could leverage, and also possibly have a conversation with TEBS regarding that, because I know, and I agree, especially this election cycle in 2020, we had a lot of Future Vote former alumni that came back as adults. And, I would love to have a way where now we do capture information, like, for example, when you apply to be a poll worker, where did you hear it? And one of the drop downs, Future Vote. So we're starting to collect that. But also, we do have adults in there. I mean, we had one that I walked in, it was in there, he was 28. And he's like, hey, Dr. Z. I was like, I don't know who you are. Like, I apologize. He had a full beard and everything. And he's like, oh, I did your program years ago. And so I want to capture that information, because they are coming back, and that's a benefit to the agency and to our voter to know, to have a better picture of what happens after they leave the program and after they leave to college or adult world and they come back to serve in that capacity.
That is perfect. Just speaking to that also, is there a way to feature a checkbox or a drop down or something of like point of entry, whether it's through Future Vote, a friend, family member,
We have
colleague?
that. Mhm.
Okay.
Well,
We
Thank
have that
you.
already.
or is there a way to not just how did you hear about this? Because how you heard about it might not have been Future Vote, but you're still an alum of Future Vote. So
Mhm.
it could very well be that you just need a separate question for everyone who applies to be a judge as to whether they've been in Future Vote, because I think that'll give you the largest number.
I think what we could do, I'll talk to the team. I think the easiest way is we have that Future Vote, like how did you hear about the program? And there's Future Vote. And then we could do is communicate to those who select Future Vote as opposed to adding another question to the application. Because the simplicity of applying is that name, address, party, it's just the base information we need to add in the module. I don't want to add another fielding question. I could extrapolate everyone who note Future Vote and I could contact them to see what was their introduction to the program, or is it maybe my older brother did it, or my mom told me about, and I could extract those individuals that select Future Vote to see exactly how they came into be to apply or even reapply to serve as an election worker.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Zelaya.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Margie.
Well, it's really great to meet you, Dr. Oh, thank you, Mr. President. And it's really great to meet you, Dr. Zelaya, in person.
A pleasure.
So I guess virtually, I've been hearing a lot of great things about the Future Votes program, and it's really great to get the presentation and learn more about it. I also like the waffle at the end. No, it's a waffle because I like waffles over pancakes. With that, I just have a question in regards to the outreach. I was wondering if there was an opportunity for interested board members that would like to more directly help out with outreach in like any sort of way possible. Maybe not every board member that's something that they might be interested in, but I know there might be some who come from diverse backgrounds and experiences and perspectives that maybe want to support an outreach event and do anything that would be beneficial to you and the work that you do. I just want to know if there is any sort of like opportunity for that, and if there isn't, maybe a little explanation why, and if there isn't, I would understand, but I just was wondering because I know there's so many people on the board who at varying levels might be interested.
So one of the challenges is, as it pertains to the day-to-day operations, we have our team, our professional team. A lot of times when we select individuals, they have served in the capacity of center managers, chief judge. They know across the gamut the historical aspect of outreach, what we've done in the past, and moving forward when it comes to community engagements. I'm always one that I welcome the board to provide point of contacts in organizations. Historically, I've never engaged in having board members working side by side with our team. You are the board, and that's just my opinion. I may be incorrect, but you are the board. I feel that if you could support us by giving us the events, the point of contacts, we will greatly, and we would follow up. And like I mentioned, I believe in the previous board meeting before I went on vacation, help us set up the pins and we will knock them down. And also the rationale is because from the community, individuals, you guys are nominated and appointed by the governor. And so I think there should be a clear delineation between a board member and a staff member. And I feel that the staff are adequately prepared, capable of conducting outreach and engagements. But I think the relationship between the staff and the board should be such that give us the contact information and we will set it up. And that's my opinion as it pertains to engaging directly as a board member working with our staff at an outreach event.
So, Margie, are you done? Okay, so Gilberto, I'm going to agree with you partially and disagree with you partially on that particular answer. I'm sure it will not surprise you on either count. I think that there's definitely a difference between board members and staff. The staff works for the board. There's no question we've been appointed by the governor to be in this job, and as you know, in Maryland there is no elected official who is in charge of elections, like there are secretaries of state in other states. There's us. Our board is, and the state board, we're a substitute for that elected official. We are the representatives of the voters. So I think there's a delicate balance here between the board not interfering with the professionalism of the staff, but also the staff taking advantage of what the board members bring to the board. And I would urge you to think about ways to engage board members aside from just telling you places you can go, because I think that there is a lot of power in the united efforts of this group. And I can tell you that, I'm sure that when I walk into a room, there are certain people that I'm going to connect with and certain people I am not. And I think that's true for all of us, including you. And I think that, we have a wealth of knowledge on this board about reaching out that can be used. We have two of our youngest board members in history, both women of color. I would suspect that they could tell us a thing or two about reaching out to young women of color. We have a former congressional nominee who's been all over a huge portion of the county in 2 different elections. We have, a number of us, all of us have been involved in the community in different ways at different times. So I would just urge you to give that some consideration. I think that it's not necessarily sufficient for, especially since, you have limited resources to go places. It's not necessarily sufficient to merely say to board members, give us your contacts and we'll be there, because it's not the same. I had a boss many years ago who wanted to combine, if you guys were, well, I'm sure that Margie and Keena may not remember. If you guys are familiar with the Rolodex, I'm sure that there's a few people here who remember the Rolodex. Ami is smiling, so she remembers the Rolodex, but Kevin might, it sounds like he might. Anyway, I had a boss many years ago who wanted to, basically very directly said that she wanted my Rolodex. What would she have done with it? She would have called people that I knew and they would have said, who are you? I don't want us to be in that, in that circumstance. Anyway, please give that some thought. It's not something that we have to, debate here now, but I look forward to the continued conversation. I do have a number of questions of my own. I have waited for others to go first. So, and I want to say first that my questions come from a perspective, like you said, I am, the parent of I guess I should call them not former future voters, I should call them future voter alumni. I think what you've done with that program is absolutely amazing. I think that the statistics show it, that you showed, in terms of a very, the young, the 16 to 25-year-old category. There's probably not another jurisdiction in the country that can make the same make the same claim. So, but I'm also from the view that anything that's good can be made better, and that's our job. And I mean, it's obviously specifically the job of the board. It's also the job of the staff. So, with that in mind, first a question. I wanted to say that I'm glad that you told us that the kids in your introductory slide for Future Vote were yours, because I suspected as much when I saw them. They looked a little young for Future Vote in that very first slide. And so I was wondering if you could just clarify for us, what is the age limit for Future Vote?
Oh, age limit is middle school. That picture was taking the take your kid to work day.
Oh,
So
okay.
obviously that's why they were younger.
Thank you, because I didn't want any confusion on that.
And I knew
on
you were
that
gonna ask
point.
that question, but I left the picture. Yeah, let's take
Yeah.
your kid to work, and I took him to work. And so
All right.
middle school.
So basically middle school. So starting at 6th grade is what you're saying.
So depending on the primary, the general elections written in the state and the federal constitution, but the primary, they move around. And so a rising 6th grader, so a 5th grader that's been promoted to 6th grade, if there's a primary and that summer, they could start earning student service learning credits that summer after 5th grade as a rising 6th grader. But middle school essentially through high school.
Okay. Now, you also said that you thought that you gave a variety of reasons why there's more middle schoolers than there are high schoolers. One reason that you didn't mention that I wonder how much of a factor you think it is that a number of middle schoolers are very motivated to get their SSL hours, and once they have the requisite number, they may be less motivated after that. And
Sure.
I'm wondering if that's part of what you're
Yeah,
doing.
it tapers. There's two things. So once the student initiate their relationship with FutureVote and also acquiring those student service learning credits, the student then it'll start tapering off in about 10th grade, 11th, and also depending what year you're in 9th or 10th grade. Obviously, if you're in an even year compared to an odd year. And then what happens is then that student, since let's say they started in 6th grade, 6th, 8th, 10th, a lot of times the students will be promoted to poll worker service after the primary election because there's still kind of this 15 and 10 months. And then once they turn 16, they were then register to vote and then participate as a poll worker. So I see it taper off in the spring of the, no, in the fall of the general election of the upcoming academic year. And so usually the 10th and 11th grader, for example, like my son, they just take the initiative of serving as a poll worker. They don't need the SSL and they desire the stipend, especially with the fact that we do invite them to serve during early voting in the weekend. So you have almost 3 full days. And a lot of our materials will promote that to encourage high school students to serve. Because if you look at the stipend, depending on how many days they serve, it could range from say $250 a voting operation judge. But if they do 3 days, if you add to early voting, that stipend will incrementally increase, obviously.
Sure. And then you're also giving a break to others who are working during the week, which is
correct.
Which is great.
Yeah, correct.
So I appreciated you had some slides about the gender and the school level and the ethnicity of the participants, and you said, and I agree, that we want as much as possible for the numbers to reflect the demographics of Montgomery County. Were those numbers current numbers or cumulative over a long period of time?
Cumulative over a period of time, so they all fluctuate. So also depending, I recall that the Latino, African diaspora, African American percentages went up when Obama was running for office. There was an interest, right?
Right.
And also depending on the election, if it's a midterm or presidential, who's running for office, it really fluctuates a couple of points up and down.
So let me ask a question about that. The number you gave us for Latino future voters was 12.5%, and the Montgomery County residents who are in that category,
20.
I believe, are roughly 20.
Yes, I know.
So I guess my question is there something more that we should be doing? Because obviously you and I both know we need Spanish speaking election officials, and maybe we need Spanish speaking future voters. And I know that there are a lot of Spanish speaking future voters, as you pointed out. So is there something more that we should be doing in order to recruit that particular population?
So we reach out to all of the school system, and we strategically reach out to certain schools and feeder schools within East County, the Gaithersburg area, Magruder, especially those feeder schools entering into middle school. We work closely with Telemundo. They really promote the program. They really get the voice out about the program. We work with former Future Vote students. We have a listserv of all the participants, and we communicate with the guardians, and we tell them, We understand that your child is no longer in high school, but if you have within your family members, friends, if you could disseminate information about future votes. So we use that list beyond the student graduating from high school. We work with a lot of organizations like Identity, Casa de Maryland. You know, a lot of times it's just the interest of the individuals, because also you have to remember one of the prerequisite to participate in future, you have to attend a mandatory training, just like our adult judges.
Oh,
And as you
remember.
know, it's at 7
Yes.
p.m. You were at the Blair one years ago. I remember you
No,
sat third row.
I think it was a
No,
different school.
no, it was
Yeah.
WJ actually. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was one of the schools, but
Whatever the case, I do remember.
whatever the case. So the point
Yeah.
is, since the trainings are during the week and we've held them on the weekends at different hours to try to find that sweet spot where we could increase.
Right.
But just a lot of times is very difficult, and we do move the training to all corners of the county to facilitate.
So let me, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do have a few questions. So let me just make a suggestion here. First of all, I'd like to get kind of more recent information and not just cumulative, to see where we are in terms of the Latino population. And in particular, you know, kind of, I'm very interested in whether we've had a difference since, like you said, in COVID, you couldn't operate Future Vote. And so you know, were our numbers in 2022 substantially different than they were prior to that? And, you know, and anything along those lines. And it sounds like you're doing great things in terms of recruiting Latinos. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is whether, you know, my question was, is there more that needs to be done? And I don't know the answer to that question. And I guess in part is would be based on what you tell me about the more recent years, because I totally understand 20 years ago, the Latino population was not nearly as high as it is now. So if it averages out to 12.5, that might be something different. As far as the high school poll worker recruitment goes, I just want to just kind of put on the record, if someone is 16, they have to be at least 16. They have to be registered to vote, but they don't necessarily have to be voting yet, right? If they are a pre-registered voter, as in they are 16, eligible to vote when they're, if they're going to, in the election, when they're going to be 18 and by the general election, they can be a poll worker?
correct. They must meet the state requirements as a registered voter.
And the state requirements for a registered voter does not necessarily mean that they have voted. It just means that they have registered to vote.
Yes, they have citizenship. They live in Maryland. They're at least 16 years of age at the point of registration.
Okay.
And they have to, and then they have to attend training, just like
Right.
any other poll worker.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I understand. They have to, we're not saying that we have a special program where they don't have to be
Mhm.
trained. We're just saying that we have another population of people that we can tap, and that have been tapped very effectively. On roughly the third slide, there was your very large sign about earning up to $210. I'm just wondering whether you've ordered the new signs yet to, you know, because obviously
Yes,
the amount of,
David. Yeah, they have. Those amounts have changed. Yes. In the
Okay.
process. That's an old picture.
okay, but I mean, do the signs exist yet, or are they on their way, or
They're on their way.
do we know approximately when they're expected?
No, we work with the print shop to put an order. I mean, why? What's the concern?
My concern is that we have information out there that's outdated. Are we still using the old signs?
No, that's a old picture, and we're not using the new banners until we get the new ones. But
Okay.
the literature that we have does have the correct amount.
Okay, okay. And as I said earlier in the meeting, I think it would be useful to have something on, you know, the front page of the website that directs people there. I realize that you are directing people via QR code, but perhaps that would be there as well. Next subject, like I do almost every year, I attended the July swearing-in ceremony for the student member of the Board of Education, and the outgoing member, Arvin Kim, listed an accomplishment related to the high school voter registration drive that I had never heard of before. When I asked him about it, he said he worked with you on it. Can you tell us about it?
I would like to talk to Arvid because that wasn't communicated. So we work.
Nope.
So I work closely with Shella Cherry out of the Office of Community Engagement, their leadership. We do work with the SGA MCR to conduct voter registration at each high school. With Arvid, last time I spoke to him was several months. Obviously, he's since
Okay.
graduated, but
No,
I don't know.
apparently this was a resolution that the board passed relating to making sure that every school was participating in the high school voter registration drive. That's about as far as I got.
Yeah, no, I know that
you're-
I have a meeting scheduled with Shella moving forward because we're lining up our visits back to the high schools once students return to schools. We historically have that gathering, but I could
Okay,
engage, I could talk to Shella about what Arvid was trying to.
no, that's okay.
communicate.
I can find out. You did mention something that I want, when I was talking about involving board members, we have 3 of us on our board at least who went through Montgomery County Public Schools. You might consider whether we as alumni can be helpful to getting your message out when you're visiting our schools.
Yeah, no, and as a former Richard Montgomery High School alumni, yeah, I agree, but thank you for your comment.
Yes, so, okay. Um, so, can you tell us a little bit about the demographics of your outreach team? Yeah, just whatever you can tell us.
Well, obviously, I'm a Hispanic male bilingual.
Right,
We have 2 females, one male. 2 are bilingual. They speak one is trilingual, actually. One is bilingual, speaks Spanish. The one speaks Spanish and speaks Hebrew. And then we have our recruiters. We also Aisha, I extend my gratitude for her also stepping in, and Debbie Hamer as well, helping out when needed during outreach events.
okay.
And they're females and they're African American.
So as far as African Americans, you're relying on the recruiters to be assisting with that outreach.
We all are cognizant of the diversity of our county.
Mhm.
We all have relationships with different organizations that represent the diversity of our county. I try to work with individuals that are diverse, just our county, not just ethnicity, but gender, but also age and the language skill needed, and also the expertise from previous expertise working as poll workers, a center manager, and also within the Future Vote program themselves. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think if there's an outreach event working with the Montgomery County NAACP, I don't necessarily have to send an African Americans to do that outreach. We have relationships with
No,
all these
absolutely.
organizations. Okay, I just want to make sure that
No,
that
absolutely. That was precisely the point that I made to the Latino Democrats. That when I spoke with them before, I said that sometimes that there's benefit in when someone who's not part of the group is coming to speak. No, I'm not suggesting that there is a requirement. I'm just trying to understand, who's doing this and how it's done.
So one of the things that I do to expand, I'm sorry, David, for cutting you off. One of the things I do to expand our reach outs into the community, and I can lean on my brother Daniel, Vice President Karoma, when his role in the OCP, Office of Community Partnership, working with the African diaspora, I would reach out to him for assistance and help. I trained all of the board members on the advisory, as far as from Doug Duncan before he was in that capacity. And I tell them honestly, I need your support. I'm not from the African diaspora. I'm the first one to admit that, obviously, and it's obvious. And Daniel will know. But I tell them that I do represent part of Montgomery County. I am an immigrant. I call myself a U.S.-born immigrant. And I'm cognizant of the need to reach out to all aspects of Montgomery County's electorate. But I also don't believe, because, for example, that I'm not blind, that I cannot necessarily have to find a staff member to do outreach with the National Federation of the Blind.
Totally.
Okay, I just want to make sure, yeah. But I am
wanna-
cognizant that we want to make our staff diverse. That's where you're.
But again, it gets back to, we have a very diverse board that may be able to help as well. I'm not suggesting that it's a requirement. I'm suggesting that it's an added boost.
Okay, noted.
And, that's all that's all I'm suggesting.
Noted.
All right. New subject. Our social media. Are you basically the person who decides when how to tweet?
Yes.
Okay. And how about who to follow?
Yes, and we have a lot of followers, and then I would follow respective organizations.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, as I understand it, we're following more than 2,000 organizations
yes.
or 2,000 Twitter users, I guess. I'm not sure they're all organizations, but
Mhm.
how do you decide who the board site will follow?
No, we don't, they follow us. So the
No,
growth
there's
of,
both, right?
yes,
There's people we follow and there's people who follow us.
okay. So the few individuals that I will follow are normally organizations, like the rec center, the library, a nonprofit, a faith organization. Anytime we do outreach with an organization, I will ask them for their handle. And I will tell them, I would love to follow you. And
Okay.
the reason is because anytime we post anything, I want them to circulate what we've posted.
Okay.
And so that's more surgical. Now,
Understood.
who follows us, I can't control.
Okay, but we
Yeah.
are following. I'm not talking about who follows us.
Yeah.
We are following more than 2,000 others.
Yes.
Okay, so, and some of them are elected officials, some of them are, I believe, candidates.
And citizens.
Okay, so I guess my question is, do we have criteria for that? Are we following every elected official? Are we following every candidate? Because I'm concerned that people might think that somehow our board is more tied to some than to others.
No, I know that. Keep in mind when Margie Rohr retired in 2018, I took on the role for the general 2018 election. So there was a large following already that were selected. From that point on, I was more surgical of who I wanted to follow. And I felt that the stakeholders that would assist us and buttress our message, I wanted to follow them. I tend not to follow someone who sends a random request because I don't know who they are. And I don't know if it's a legit handle, right? Because the advent of identity theft and all these trolls, you have to be very careful. But that's the reason why I asked a lot of times the organizations to give me their handle so I could get the correct one, because a lot of times they have old handles that they don't use and they circulate. I tend not to randomly select the average Joe, just because a lot of times I see that there's a lot of misinformation. But the criteria is that since I took the helm as it pertains to the social media handles, is to request the handles of our partners. From there, I really tend not to go beyond that.
Okay, but it sounds, I mean, I've looked at some, I obviously haven't looked at 2,000, but to me, it looks like there are a number of public officials, there are a number of people who ran for office, and I guess, again, my hope would be that we would at least think about whether we need criteria for that so that we don't have complaints that people are being treated differently. Because I gather that, and I understand what you're telling me, your purpose in that is that you follow people because then our message gets out further. And we have a lot of reason to want our messages to get out to public officials and candidates and, and all that. Safe to say that if a board member makes a request to you to follow them, that you would?
Yes.
Okay.
If you feel there's a benefit for the agency and also for the individuals that they may represent, whether they're an elected official or a chair of a HOA or an association or the director of a nonprofit or a social worker at a school, student service advocate, send them my way, just like
Okay.
the outreach events.
Okay. Do you think it would make sense for our website and our social media to be coordinated by the same person so that we're pushing the same messages? I realize that they are different in some ways, but they are also, the messages are not necessarily different.
Boris.
That was a question for you, Hilberto.
Sorry, David, can you just please elaborate on coordination of the website and social media? Because social media is more dynamic versus website, which is more static, user service friendly. So we are separating between the information and services. If you go to website, you collect services and information, I agree. But social media is primarily information on the ongoing activities. So I'm not sure that I see how to coordinate.
Well, if the example that I would use is that we are giving people information about becoming an election judge, registering to vote, wait times when we're in the midst of elections. We're giving that information out in both places. And my sense has been, you know, I've been on the board for 12 years. My sense has been that the website is being handled very differently, and maybe you're now confirming that, than our social media, and that our website, I would not want our website to be called static. I don't view that as being a plus. I think our website needs to. It's not going to be as fast as our social media, but I think our website needs to give information. There still are a lot of people out there, even in Montgomery County, Maryland, who are not on Twitter and are not on Facebook, but they are looking at websites. And so you know, that's why I was asking the question about how to communicate, how we think we should coordinate our communication between the various, just like we would want to coordinate, but you know, we do have the same person who is issuing press releases and doing our social media. Those are also not the same. So I was just asking, you know, does it make sense to try and coordinate all those things, because those are all forms of outreach by our board?
I agree with the statement. Maybe static is too harsh word, but the fact is, it takes Gilberto a minute to write a Twitter input, right? For us to produce something for the website, to have the code changed, to have it posted, it takes a bit longer on the website.
I totally agree.
So we cannot be very.
But Boris, if it takes him a minute to write it on Twitter and the same message should be on our website, there's a couple of different things that could happen to make that happen. First of all, our Twitter feed could be embedded on our website. And then, you know, it would be, you know, I think I'm not the expert in IT, but I think that would mean that every web user would have access to his messages. But even so, if he's putting something on Twitter that should be on our website, yeah, it's not going to happen as fast, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. And in order to make that happen, how do we make sure that somebody is watching those communications in order to make sure that for those who aren't on social media, there is a way for them to get the message? That's the basis of my question.
Okay, so no, I'm completely open to any suggestion that would help us streamline these communication. I have to really look into this, because I know, for example, that on a Twitter or Facebook, Gilberto can repost different invitation, go register, help us with this, help us with that. On the website, it's just it's drop-down menu, help us, or go register, help us serve as election judge.
I don't think the drop-down menu is the only possibility for our website. I just should say.
Mr. President?
Yes, Alex.
May I suggest that I think we're venturing into a whole new topic that has a lot of nuance and detail to it that probably would be best suited for another meeting or
happy to do that.
Further dialogue.
Happy to do that. I didn't realize that was the case, but happy to
just
go
given
on.
The lateness of the hour, I'm just suggesting.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure. Happy to go on to. I only have 2 other issues left. Actually, I take it back. I have 3, but none of them are going to take very long. Gilberto, there are.
Mr. President, can you, I see Kina had her hand up. I just want to, since you've acknowledged Alex, it'd be good for you to acknowledge her as well.
Sure, Kina, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, President. Considering the timing, as Alex just so eloquently shared regarding this conversation, and of course of our fellow staff members, I want to present an opportunity for us to consider our timing going forward, though I believe my opportunity to suggest this would have been at the top of the agenda. So I do apologize if this is an outstep from our regular proceedings, but it's a suggestion that I'd like to make towards the end of today's meeting.
Okay, well, I will certainly be happy to take that into consideration. What I did in this particular meeting was give everybody else the opportunity to ask their questions first before I asked mine. I do have a few more questions left. I will be as quick as I can. I do realize what the hour is, and I do realize that that we all have multiple things to do. So I will move forward expeditiously. A couple of suggestions going in our outreach, Dr. Z. What have we done so far to put out the story of our election director? He's new. He has a very interesting background. He has worked in democracy efforts overseas. I realize that it may not have been high on his priority list. I think it would actually be a very interesting topic for our residents.
Can I just start by saying that David is 100% right, saying that putting my story out was really never high on my list, and I really never spoke to Gilberto about that. I just see myself as a part of the board of election.
Well, you are more than that. You are the official spokesperson for the Board of Elections, according to your job description.
Fair enough.
And in that capacity, you should be out there. But anyway, I don't need an answer. If you don't want to answer that one, we can talk about that one later. I will say that another feature that I think we should consider is that we have a number of very excellent election workers in our office who I'm talking about our permanent staff. They do not get nearly the exposure that Dr. Z gets. Dr. Z is known everywhere. Sometimes I say his name and they don't know him, but if I say Dr. Z, they do. But we have a number of very dedicated staff people, and I think that we should consider that as well. Okay, the texting app. At the moment, if you text the early voting portion of the app, it doesn't recognize it. Is that a expected, or is that a bug?
There's no early voting sites for between elections.
So you're saying that when the election is over, if somebody wants to know where the early voting sites were before, they cannot do so by text?
Correct. Early voting and Dropbox.
No,
we're not-
no, the drop boxes are still on. So I was about to get to the drop boxes.
Well, this should have been, we've put so historically, I always put a request, once the drop boxes, once on election night at 8 p.m. when all polls are closed, the request to TEBS is to deactivate drop boxes. And on the last day of early voting at 8 p.m. or when all early voting centers are closed, to deactivate also EV plus zip code. So I will find out tabs. I should have, when I checked months ago, they were deactivated. Don't know why they're reactivated. I will.
Okay, well, the drop boxes are still active. You may recall, I don't remember which election it was when we started the texting. I had a question about our use of the word nearest to talk about drop boxes, because as I understand the way this app works, it picks basically the nearest drop box to any portion of a zip code. It does not actually measure where the voter is when they reach out, and it's not necessarily their nearest 4 drop boxes. It is nearby drop boxes. And I guess it's measured as the crow flies, not as the car drives. is that something that can be changed? Because our voters definitely, you know, if they're going to go to a drop box there, in all likelihood, they are going to drive there.
Yeah, I recall that conversation was held when you raised a concern through TEBS and individuals in the county government. And I believe that it was an issue of the programming and also the vendor that houses the texting prompt. And one of the arrangement that was made working with you in 2020 was the word of closest. Your preference was nearest. And that's what
No,
we used.
no, no, no. My
Or was it the
preference was
opposite?
no, my preference was nearby, because they're not near,
Nearby.
they're not nearest and they're not closest. Um, and again, my preference for this is because we're the Board of Elections and we should be precise. And if we tell the voters, here are the 4 nearest drop boxes, and they know that they are not, then I think our credibility suffers. So, so what I was, and I also think that no one would expect that the nearest would be measured as the crow flies instead of, you know, by roads. And I would suggest that, I mean, again, we don't have to discuss it now. I would suggest that we talk about it. My recollection at that time was that there was a timing issue that was like, we can't mess with this now because, you know, it's too close to the election, et cetera. I don't remember all the details. But we're, you know, at some point we need to address it. At the very least, I would say I would change nearby. I'm sorry, nearest to nearby.
Okay, so from closest to near.
No. I never said nearest.
Okay, President Naaman, understood. Nearby, we will change the verbiage.
Okay, so on the subject of zip codes, the list that we received for the meeting today has 3 different entries of cities for 20902. It has Silver Spring, Glenmont, and Wheaton. And I was wondering why they are split in 3. And as you may know, I grew up not far from there.
Understood.
And to me, 20902 is, you know, some people call it Silver Spring, some people call it Wheaton, but I'm not aware that there are actual boundaries that are at use there. But when you add them all together, I counted 16 events in 20902, but they were split in 3.
Okay, so getting into the weeds of day-to-day operations, the way I came up with the zip code was when an organization reaches out and says, Gilberto, can you cover an event at, let's say, an HOA? Or let's say, since you're talking about that zip code, Glenmont, say at the Brookside Gardens event, right? The Green Fest. When the coordinator or my counterpart of that organization, Park and Planning, they will send me their information. The address they provide of the events, I then will put that in the smart sheet. I don't go back into the post service to verify that zip code is correct or that city. I go by the address. And then when I tally those zip codes on behalf of the board, literally I look at the column, I sort them out by zip code. I mean, I sort them out by
Okay.
city, alphabetical
So it's
order.
based on what they give you.
Correct. I don't go
okay.
to, I don't check. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand.
Okay.
So in other words, some people call it Silver Springs, some people call it Wheaton.
Some people
you
call
know,
it
whatever.
Kentland, some people call it
Right,
Gaithersburg.
right,
Correct.
whatever, right. And then same with 20855 Rockville and Durwood, you know,
Yeah,
same
correct.
same kind of thing. Okay,
Yes.
thank you for that explanation. That helps a lot. The outreach calendar does not include outreach events on July 4th, on Labor Day, on Veterans Day, and I'm wondering, and I don't remember whether we did outreach events on MLK Day or Juneteenth. And I realize that there's a limited number of people on your staff, but I'm wondering whether we are missing really good opportunities to reach out to the community, because each of those communities are potentially, you know, communities that we need. For, you know, Ami talked about the need for political diversity in our judges. I'm guessing we would find political diversity on Veterans Day in a number of different places. So I'm just wondering if there's a reason why we're not doing those events and whether we could.
So depending on the events, so for example, July 4th, we've done events in the past. I've done it personally. It's extremely unsafe. It's dark. A lot of people come in at the last minute to get a spot to see the fireworks, and then they all disappear. I'm gonna be honest with you, the last thing they're worried about is registering to vote. They want to get the spot, they get their lawn chairs, they want to look at the fireworks, and they leave. When it comes to other events, I know we've done some events where it's Memorial Day or Labor Day. Sometimes county events will be held the day before or the day after. And then also if it's like a 4th of July, county governments sometimes are closed. And sometimes the staff will just want to spend time with their family. I believe in work-life balance. Yes, we do a lot of outreach events. I've done them personally, a lot of them. So for example, Juneteenth, and I think in the last board meeting, board member Delau, she mentioned about a high number of outreach events, say in Silver Spring and that up county. And that's true. I think that's something that occurs in the county in general as outreach events. A lot of county events, whether the county government sponsored or nonprofit sponsor, a lot of them are down county. And so what happens, for example, Juneteenth, we always participate in the Juneteenth festival that the county puts together at Black Rock Center for Arts. Because number one, it's one of the few big events up county. There's not a lot going on county. And that's why strategically we'll do a relationship with like identity, or for example, we'll do things at the high schools or Germantown Library. If they have like a book club reading, and I kind of surgically look, especially anything north of Rockville, because a lot happens down county. And that's been in existence since I've been working as a county employee before my time here at the Board of Elections. It's just the way it is. And even we get a lot of, concerns from voters where they say, oh, there's another community center being built down county and that up county. And I'm a Clarksburg resident, so they come to me like I have the money and I don't. But it is what it is, right? But you're correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I guess, well, I would guess that there would be people who, out there, and I realize, yes, I believe in work-life balance too. It's very important. I live it every day. I would say that there are opportunities that I think we should at least consider. And I do think that the geographic balance that Margie talked about is something we should look at. And if we're only going to events that are already taking place in the down county, we're probably missing a lot. There's probably a lot of people in the up county who aren't going to those events, who we aren't hitting as much. And if you as a Clarksburg resident probably very familiar with that problem. And I think one of the things we should be looking at is geographic diversity as well, because there's probably people there that we won't see any other way. And that is all I have for today. I do have other questions, of course, but this dialogue will I'm sure continue. Is there anybody else who has questions for Gilberto before we let him go? And then Ami, go ahead.
Really have a question. I want to make a comment, though, that perhaps we ought to have outreach as a monthly item on the agenda, just to get an update and an opportunity to make other comments that we may think of after seeing the briefing.
I think that's an excellent idea. And why don't we go ahead and just plan on that. And thank you, Ami, for that excellent suggestion.
Yeah,
And
well, Dr. Z may or may not thank me for that one.
No worries. Here to serve.
He's done an excellent job today, and thank you very much, Dr. Z, for your excellent presentation and for answering so many questions. Daniel, you have a comment on this subject?
Yeah, I was actually going to amend Ami's recommendation by saying I don't think the board we should have like the highlight of outreach, not the day-to-day in terms of strategic planning or thinking that went into it. We trust your expertise. We trust your work. I think giving us the highlights would be really one that would be more informative. I mean, if you permit me, let me adjust.
There's no motion on the floor, and we will put outreach on the agenda, and we will do our best to stick to the big ticket items. And Gilberto, thank you very much. And we will move on to the next item on the agenda. I don't believe there's any old business. Does anyone have any old business? Okay, as far as new business goes, remember the bylaws discussion is being put off until until our next meeting. Kevin, would you like to put off the review of the SBE documents to that meeting as well?
Yes, I just a couple of things. Why don't we do that? But just a reminder that the biannual meeting is October 19th. That is mandatory for all board members. So please make sure that's on your calendar. And in the materials, there's a reference to the Open Meetings Compliance Act training. David has already taken the training, but I would certainly encourage each of you to take the training as well if you have the time to do it. But why don't we go ahead and table the other things, because the ethics issues really, they kind of logically flow with the bylaws.
Right, that's kind of what I figured. Boris, list of future action items from today's meeting.
Okay. There were a few comments made how to present input in the director's report going forward, and some items that we could include or should include going forward. So there's a request for the detailed breakdown of the budget lines, spelling out acronyms, and I promised to share with the board the date when we put Election Aid 2 position at the county website for the temporary staff in 2024, so board members can reach out through their connection and increase that number. There's a request to look at the total hours spent on outreach annually, if possible, if we can pull that through the system. Future vote transition to the EJs. That's the data that Gilberto has to look at to see if we can pick it up, and to look how to increase the visibility of the election judges' stipend and positions on our website. Did I manage to capture everything?
Does anybody have anything else that they think should be on that list from today's meeting?
Sorry, Dave, I didn't.
Yes, for Roscoe Nick's registration status.
Yeah, I will pull his registration stats as well.
Wow. Okay, that'll be an interesting story for sure. Okay, I think that's a good list. Thank you very much for that. Okay, our next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes as they were amended in our conversations by email that are specifically prohibited by, specifically allowed by the rules. Is there a motion on the minutes?
I move. I think you did an excellent job of amending them, Mr. President, and so I move we accept them as amended.
So you're moving both the June 5th and the June 26th
Yes.
minutes as amended, and Daniel, you are seconding?
That is correct.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous. All righty, our next meeting, the August meeting is always listed as tentative, and it is canceled as often as it is held, but unfortunately today, I don't think we're in a position to say whether it's going to be canceled or held, and I'm going to ask Kevin to explain a little bit about that, and then we will adjourn after that.
Sure. So one of the early voting sites, the activity center at Borough Park, there is an issue perhaps with the use of the gymnasium for the primary and the general. And so staff is going to be looking at getting some additional information, getting it to the board, perhaps having the board get more actively involved in communications and discussions with Deaconsburg's officials to see whether it will be possible to use the gymnasium for both the primary and the general election.
Kevin, do you know something that I don't? Because when I heard it the first time, I thought it was just the general election. It's actually both the primary and the general.
No, it is both, but obviously, no, excuse me, it's the general election, but I would like to make sure that it's going to be available for the primary and the general.
Okay.
It'd be unfortunate to have to change.
Right. So basically, I think what we're saying is that for right now, we're not going to cancel the August meeting, but we're going to do our best to see if we can work this out without the board needing to take any kind of formal position, et cetera. And then, but if we do need to, that's what we need the August meeting for. Given the schedule for the early voting and the possible need to appeal to other bodies, et cetera, we need to keep that flexibility. Do I have that approximately right, Kevin?
That's correct.
Okay. So, so that meeting is a tentative meeting, but we will definitely stay in touch about that. Is there any other business for the good of the order?
Motion to adjourn.
No motion to adjourn is needed. We have hit the end of our agenda, and so therefore we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. I think it was a very productive meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Everyone, good night.